Hello everyone and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Dashu and I'm joined by my good friend from across the pond. It's not afternoon where he is, it's nighttime. Talking about my good friend, the host of the We Played This podcast at one point, the Without a Mouse podcast at one point, as well, Mr. Timothy Henton.
Zetus Lapidus, Chris, thanks for inviting me on the show again.
Zetus Lapidus is a strange catchphrase, to say the least. But somehow it does work. And if you don't know what Zetus Lapidus is, well, you will by the time we're done talking about this movie. We're talking about the Disney Channel original movie from 1999, Zenon, Girl of the 21st Century. So the film is directed by Kenneth Johnson. It is based off of a book by Marilyn Sadler and Roger Boland by the same name. It stars Kirsten Storm, Raven Simone, Holly Fulger, Stuart, Pankin, Frederick Coffin, and a whole bunch of other people as well. We actually got an interview with three people. So I actually got to speak to Kenneth Johnson, the director, Stuart Pankin, who plays Commander Plank, and Holly Fulger, who plays Zenon's aunt. So we'll play those at some point. But I am curious, Mr. Henton, Mr. Without a Mouse podcast man. This obviously meets your criteria for a film that is without a mouse.
Yeah.
What did you think of Zenon? Because I'm assuming this is the first time you'd seen it.
Yeah, this was the first time I'd seen it.
Which is weird to me, man. We're the same age. Like, you should have seen this, right?
Yeah, well, I think I've mentioned on this show before. I definitely mentioned on mine that we didn't really have the Disney Channel. It wasn't as sort of popular over here as it was in America. So there were very few of my friends that actually had the Disney Channel. And when things were like major things for you guys, they often weren't as big over here. And for one thing, like from my recollection, the first Disney Channel original movie that went mainstream was actually High School Musical. So we're talking.
What does mainstream mean? You mean like beyond? You mean beyond the Disney Channel?
Yeah, beyond the Disney Channel, but also like culturally, like kids just did not talk about DCOMs over here. It wasn't a popular thing to talk about because so few people had the Disney Channel. But yeah, so this was a film that I had never seen, but I've heard plenty of Americans on podcasts referring to it as one of their favorite DCOMs. So I was very excited to watch it. And I don't think I was too disappointed, to be honest. Considering some of the shite I have had to watch for my podcast and yours, I think it was a good pick.
That feels oddly pointed and directed specifically at me. I just want you to know that. But to be fair, you're not wrong. Like,
I did say to you ages ago that I was quitting my Disney podcast because I was sick of doing it. And then all you ever do is invite me on to review Disney films.
I mean, again, here's the funny thing. To be fair, the last 3 months we've been able to find something that works, that is a Disney thing that doesn't feel like a stretch. You know, I don't think for February we're going to be able to watch a Disney noir film. So I think you're going to be watching something that's not a Disney movie with me, which what would crack me up is if you say no because it's not a Disney movie, and then I will fucking lose my mind.
You're telling me that Who Framed Roger Rabbit does not class as a noir?
That's to be fair, but we've already talked about it.
Oh, okay. I'll let you off.
I beat you. You see, I beat you to it. And cross promotion back to that episode, we actually got to talk to the gentleman who wrote the book that the film is based on. So, and we somehow managed to conjure Bob Hoskins' ghost. So it's kind of weird. But back to Zenon. I really like this. I remember seeing it as a kid. I mean, I would have been, this came out in January of 99, so I would have been 8 going on 9. I remember seeing it. I remember having it either on VHS or maybe on just recorded it over the air. You know, I don't really remember how I watched it. The thing about technology back in the late 90s was, A, I was too young to really remember, and B, I mean, technology wasn't where it is now. So, like, if I said I watch Zenon now, I'm either watching it on my Plex server or I'm watching it on Disney Plus. Yeah. Back then, I don't remember how the hell I saw it.
Well,
but I remember seeing it. So,
although a lot of people my age didn't have the Disney Channel, one thing that happened quite a few times in my childhood was the cable service that we had would do a free Disney weekend. So we actually did have a few DCOMs taped off the TV onto VHS, but it was literally because it was a free-for-all for one weekend, and we literally would set the VHS player and record as much of that shit as we possibly could. And I remember the things that I had taped from that one weekend one year was, and I can't remember what it was called, but there was a DCOM which was a cartoon about a young couple that had a crazy, over-the-top maniac of a baby, and it was called something Baby. I can't remember what the film was apart from that.
So it seems like you missed Zenon just barely.
Yeah, because the Annie was from 1999 as well, I believe. So I don't know if it was rerun later on or if it was probably around the same time.
To speak to the quality of the film, it's pretty good, right? I mean, it's not doing anything particularly novel. I mean, not now in 2020. In 1999, I would say it's pretty forward thinking. I mean, it's a Disney Channel original movie about a strong female protagonist, which, I mean, for the longest time, Disney has trafficked in that, and I can't help but applaud them for it, because strong female protagonists is something that I'm a huge fan of, as I'm sure you are, Tim.
Yeah.
And a lot of these Disney Channel original movies, especially something like this, are kind of what I would consider to be a spiritual kind of counterpart to this is Halloween Town. I mean, this is essentially sci-fi Halloween Town in a way.
Yeah, I'd agree.
They're both very well known for their strong female protagonists, and that's not a bad thing.
But they always need help from their hacker boyfriends, and it's technically all of the solutions to their problems do still come from men in this film.
In this one, I was just saying, and Halloween Town, not so much.
Yeah, not so much in that one.
Xenon, definitely, yeah, no. Xenon is more of a team effort with less of a sole female protagonist. I mean, she's still a very strong character, but yeah, I see what you mean. But other than maybe that little kind of, I would say, issue of kind of, again, it's a strong female protagonist, but she's not really given full reign of the story. I like this a lot. Kirsten Storms is good. She's well cast.
Yeah, it's the acting, especially from all the young is fine. Yeah, more than passable. Which is something that can't be said for so many Disney films that I have had to watch for my podcast and yours. They tend to despite being made, often kids films about kids for, they really are shit at finding decent child actors.
Well, and I think, and when we play the interview with Kenneth Johnson, you'll hear kind of a little bit about working with children actors or younger actors. I mean, a lot of it is, some of them don't have as much experience as their adult counterparts.
Absolutely.
And, also some of them only get to be on set for 4 hours a day too. So
yeah, I suppose that's got.
Look, there's a reason that they hire actors who are 18 to play 14-year-olds. There's a reason for it. It's so that, they don't have to worry about the child labor laws and, overworking them. And because I know for children actors, you have to give them a certain amount of time every day to do schoolwork and stuff like that. Yeah. So again, I understand why you cast older actors to play younger characters, because kids 18, you're an adult now. Welcome to being overworked and underpaid, probably.
You've reminded me of, I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix, but there's a really good comedy called Love, and one of the main characters is actually, for his job, he is an on-set teacher. So you get to see that kind of, I know obviously it's a comedy and it's not, fully based in reality, but you do get to see that kind of the way the child labor laws work, and it's quite funny with it. I'd recommend it if you've not seen it.
Yeah, it's just, it's one of those things that, I know gets made fun of, Disney Channel stuff gets made fun of a lot, or just, I guess, children, young adult programming, this, oh my God, cast Zac Efron to play a 16-year-old. That dude is, in his early 20s, yeah, well, he also doesn't have to worry about, the child labor laws, so it makes perfect sense from a logistics standpoint. Yeah, exactly, exactly, all of those things as well. I will say, though, that, outside of the children actors who it's pretty much the Kirsten Storms and Gregory Smith show. Raven-Symoné, Raven's not in it that much. She's already a big time star at this point. Having worked on The Cosby Show and tons of other things. And this is essentially right before she is cast on, That's So Raven, a show that literally bears her whole name. Yeah. She's already a well-known actress. And director Kenneth Johnson actually mentioned to me that Raven-Symoné was almost cast as Zenon, which totally could have worked.
Although she's not in the film very much, I do think she does steal any scene that she's in, just like... Yeah, not as in, tries to be obnoxious and steal... It's not like she's purposely stealing the scene, but you can tell that she is very much the seasoned actor of the group. She comes across as very competent.
Yeah, and, Kirsten Storm's, this is effectively, her first, leading role gig. So... it's a pretty big gig. She had worked on some television beforehand, but this is her first film. This is a film that she is the lead in. Yes, it's a television film, but yeah, it's still a film. So sorry to break it to people who don't like to give television movies credit for still being movies, which that shit's annoying. That's a complete tangent, but it's annoying. It cracks me up because, Kirsten Storm's is good, but Raven-Symoné clearly way better. Again, and it just goes to, again, this issue with children actors. And if you have a child actor who's been acting since, Raven-Symoné had been acting since the mid 80s, on the Cosby Show, I think as early as 87 that sounds about right. She knows what she's doing. Yeah. She doesn't have that hill that Kirsten Storms does. And it unfortunately it does show.
I think where Raven does better is that she's got some really great comic timing for such a young actor. So there's the scene where they're all kind of hanging out in Zenon's room, and there's the repetition of Raven asking if she can borrow Zenon's clothes, and despite basically saying the same line over and over again, the more she repeats it, the funnier it gets. And that's the kind of humor that a lot of adults really can struggle with, that kind of making the repetition funny, but it's really good.
Yeah, it's effortless. And look, she, of the issues I have with this movie, I wish she was a bigger character. We both understand that the framing device of the film is Zenon she's a headstrong female, teenager on a space station, and she ends up getting herself in so much trouble that she has to be sent back to Earth to spend time with Holly Fulger's character, who plays her aunt, her mom's sister, and Raven's character is on the space station, and I would say 2/3 of this movie is spent on Earth.
Yeah, something like that.
Most of it is spent on Earth. You don't really see Raven again until the final act of the movie. Yeah, and so it's kind of disappointing because Raven is great, Stuart Pankin is great, his costume notwithstanding, which is his is the wildest. He even mentions it in the interview we did, but his costume is the wildest of anyone's. Yeah. It is just it's completely it's so far into sci-fi, it's completely past something like Zenon, by completely. Because Zenon, the set design and the costume design is really interesting because it's meant to be, this is meant to take place in reality of Earth, and but what they're wearing is straight out of 50s and 60s sci-fi.
And also color wise, the palette is so vivid. It kind of, I always think it looks earlier in the 90s than 99. It almost has a Saved by the Bell kind of wackiness to the costumes, which is really putting you in 92, 93. So bizarrely, I think the costumes look more retro than they do futuristic. As you said, the captain's uniform, it's as if if clowns existed in the Starship Troopers universe, this is what they would dress like.
It's wacky. His is the wackiest because it has this really accentuated collar and really overblown buttons. It looks exaggerated. Zenon on the space station is wearing like, it's like a full body onesie with like clothes on top of it, which is super fucking weird, by the way.
Yeah.
It's effectively like, you know, from like Always Sunny, like the Green Man suit. So like a spandex suit that stops at your wrists, and then I assume it stops right below your sock line on your so at your ankles, and then it essentially comes right up to your neck, and then you put clothes on top of it. Like, so you're like wearing like a big underwear suit. It's super weird. It's an interesting choice, and it's like a very specific choice, right? Like,
yeah, I'm sure like whoever was the costume designer, I imagine that they, in their head, it was a functional piece of clothing that you required in space, but obviously nowhere in the plot does it tell us what it is, and it just for some reason all the kids are wearing under their clothes.
Yeah, it's super weird. It's I guess it's supposed to be like kind of uniform-esque in a way, like, you know, kind of in like Star Trek or something where they would wear those uniforms. I guess it's kind of like that. It's just a super weird choice because it's legit just like a Lycra, like spandex bodysuit with clothes on top. And like, I haven't noticed it until I watched it this time, but it's super super distracting because it's an odd choice.
Between the actual costumes and the set design as well, like I've never seen a science fiction futurism that has made me so nostalgic for a past time before, which is crazy because all of the things that they use to make this film look futuristic are so very, very 90s. Like all of the computers are, you know, like let's have it's a PC, but it's got a flat screen, but at the same time it is literally just an over-the-counter flat screen that you could buy in the 90s. So all of the technology is that ever so slightly dated. Like instead of using a mouse, we've got a futuristic trackball, which obviously even that's dated by today's standards and things like that. It's just everything about this film looks so backwards future. It's brilliant. And one of my favorite little...
You don't like the characters sitting in a circle around the teacher just happens to be a hologram? Like that is... I mean that's so dated in the best way though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I love it. Like you said, it makes me nostalgic in a good way. Like it's a vision of the future that like this movie supposedly takes place 29 years from now. Like you know.
Yeah. It's mad, isn't it? My favorite little detail was, I don't know if you noticed, but in the space station, all of the buttons for all of the doorways were just a old school 1970s. I don't know if you know of the toy Simon Says, just slapped on the wall. So even that, you know, this was sci-fi tech that they were using that was, by the time this film came out, 30 years old already, and they were using it to look futuristic.
But again, I have to give him credit because it's believable, right? Like I'm not walking away from this movie going like, oh man, look at, you can see the strings, look how cheap this looks. It looks good. It looks good
It's not that it looks cheap. It just looks so interesting and so bizarre, but in the best way.
Yeah, it's a very specific choice. Just like their like full body leotards that they're wearing, it is a choice, a specific choice. It's not like you just said, just dress them up in, garishly colored uniforms. It's no, we're going to do this specific thing that all these characters are wearing, and then they're building their uniforms on top of it. Like that's a specific choice. And, Kenneth Johnson in our interview, he's going to talk a little bit about the production design and the fact that they were, essentially just reusing the same set and dressing it a different way to signify a different level of the space station. And I mean, again, even with the kind of like, that's old school trickery, that's old school.
Yeah.
It works. I mean, again, the thing about these Disney Channel original movies is they're so like careful with where they set these things that, especially like something like this or something like Halloween Town, it has to be believable to a point, but it never feels like they're pushing it so far where you can see how limited the budget was.
Yeah. And obviously, like, it makes sense to have sets that can be reusable, especially for the space station when the majority of this film is going to be set on Earth anyway. So just
yeah. So what did you think of Zenon on Earth?
So it was very interesting in the fact, like, they want this film to be set in the future and be futuristic, but they also want being on Earth to feel backwards compared to being in space and behind the times. So basically, when I love the way she goes back to Earth and it is still the 90s. Essentially, like there is no attempt to make the Earth scenes feel futuristic in any way.
No, I think the farthest they go is like trying to set it somewhere on the coast so that it just kind of feels California. Yeah. And so like as opposed to it feeling like the future, it just feels like SoCal. Yeah. So it's just like that the kind of the delineation between space station and somewhere that has a pretty kind of distinct personality of its own in Southern California. Yeah. It kind of works in a way. But like, yeah, it's kind of weird that Earth is not in the future. Like,
but despite everything looking the same and feeling the same, apparently every child can hack into any computer mainframe. That seems to be the case with the Earth kids. They can just.
Gregory Smith is Greg Hackerman in Zenon.
Oh, and you've got to love the traditional 90s trope of a computer virus being designed to look literally like some kind of insect that's eating the insides of your computer. That's the millennium.
How Independence Day of them.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the virus in Independence Day where it's like a Jolly Roger shows up on the screen and starts laughing. Like that's not how viruses work at all.
When they give the bad guy the decoy disc, I almost want Dennis from Jurassic Park to come up like,
Look, the 90s was the era of like kids know everything about technology. Yeah. And I mean, you look at like something like Jurassic Park, you look at something like this. I mean, there are so many examples out there that I can't think of at the moment, but I know that they are there because something like even Mercury Rising, like, you have these like children who are, not like autistic or anything, but they're just like really gifted at hacking. Yeah. And it feels almost like an older generation's response to like, oh, those kids with their technology. And it's like, yeah, but I think you're giving them too much credit, guys.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, kids, I mean, like, yeah, I think even now, like in 2020, there are some aspects of technology that like maybe you and I aren't even like using to the fullest of their ability. But like, I don't really believe that like a ostensible 13-year-old could hack into the mainframe of effective like a Fortune 500 company. Like, no, I don't believe that for a moment. Maybe like one kid would, but like you don't just happen to meet that kid at your high school. Like,
yeah, it's funny as well because like normally you'd have if this was a film set maybe 5 years. Made 5 years earlier, the hacker kids would still be those dorky kids from the science club and all this. But these are, as you say, it's like these SoCal California cool dudes who, oh, by the way, they can also hack into your mainframe. Like it's a really funny juxtaposition, and it's something you don't see very often.
But you know what? Speaking of kind of the SoCal attitude, I do appreciate that Holly Fulger as Aunt Judy is probably. I mean, like she steals the show as much as Raven-Symoné does. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's great. Like her relationship with Zenon is better than the relationship Zenon has with her parents.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is hilarious. Zenon's parents almost see her as like a problem.
Yeah,
like, that they have to manage. And her aunt is like, yeah, whatever. You're cool. I'm cool. I'm the cool aunt. Like she doesn't even have to try to be cool, right? Like she just is cool.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see you have two characters who have such a believable relationship. And that is the crux of the entire film is, I would say, their relationship, because again, most of the film is on Earth anyways.
Yeah. And I suppose quite like Halloween Town again, it's female family relationships, isn't it? Rather than
yeah.
So that's always
good.
That's
right. Yeah, because I guess Holly Fulger is kind of playing the Debbie Reynolds character in this movie, right?
Yeah,
the extended family member who gets the character, the main character. And she, I mean, again, they have a very believable relationship, but for as much as I like Gregory Smith and everything I've seen him in, and he's good in this, it's like such a dorky character idea. Like, it feels like it's written by an adult who doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Hacker kids, they're everywhere and they know what they're doing. Like, okay, sure, guys, whatever. But I think, let's take a break and we'll play the 3 interviews that I did with Kenneth Johnson, Holly Fulger, and Stuart Pankin. And when we come back, we'll finish up talking about the film, and we'll talk about, I would say, one of the things that the film is definitely known for.
Talk about Zenon, huh?
As someone who is a fan of of V, I mean, I'm a little. I'm gonna put it this way: I wasn't alive when the original V came out.
Right.
I'm 30 years old, so right. My age notwithstanding, it was one of those things that I actually saw because of my love for Robert Englund's body of work. And obviously, I mean, I don't have to tell you where Robert Englund really got his start. It wasn't as Freddy Krueger.
No, there's a very funny piece. You can find it on YouTube where Robert. It's a send up that Robert did of himself on some comedy show, I guess, and where a woman is coming in to meet him, and he's showing her all of the artifacts, and Freddie, you remember who and she said, oh no, my favorite character was he, and he says, I know, don't tell me, it was Willie, right? It was Willie. It's always Willie. And Bob told me that when he was out doing a PA tour for Freddy versus Jason years ago, and he'd have these press conferences, and all the questions were always about V and not about Freddy. And
sure.
And at one point, the people that were running the thing, they were really annoyed, and they said to the press people, they said, "Look, does anybody have a question that's not about V?" And all the hands came down. And it was like, so he's always has been as amused as I was that role that he created and played so brilliantly became so iconic and part of what's attached to his legacy. He's a wonderful guy, and we had great fun working together.
I was about to say, like you just mentioned, there is this idea that certain actors are known for one thing or another. I think I want to say I've reached out to Mr. Englund's people a couple times, and never for not Friday the 13th. Jesus Christ,
yeah.
never for Nightmare.
Right.
For as big of a fan as I am of that of the series,
right.
And I've never done that. For that almost exact reason that you just mentioned, like, I can only imagine he does not want to ask me or hear me ask him any more fucking questions about Freddy Krueger. Like, what can I say at this point that has not already been said?
Yeah, that's right. That's pretty much pretty much it. But
which brings me to us talking about Zenon versus V or Bionic Woman or so many of the other things that. I guess I would maybe incorrect assumption you are more known for than Zenon.
Yeah, that's true. Although It's interesting, in the classes, I have a filmmaking class seminar that I do a few times a year. I started out I created it for UCLA originally, and did it there for several years, and then also I've presented it at USC and the Loyola Film School, NYU Film School, and a lot of the University of California venues around town and
sure,
and around the state, and also the English National Film School and the State University of Moscow, actually, and more recently, the last 8 or 9 years, I've done it 2 or 3 times a year for the master students at the New York Film Academy. And it's funny because and I use a lot of film clips all the way through the seminar. It's really so I can really illustrate my points by stuff, and most of them have come from my own work. And when the stuff for Zenon comes up, it's amazing how so many of the students light up, because that was the latest stuff of mine that they saw in their in their age group. And it was until High School Musical came along. My understanding is that it was that Zenon was the highest-rated Disney movie that they'd ever had. I think maybe Halloween Town was similar, but
I was about to say there's definitely one more movie in there that is the other. I mean, the way I look at it is there are two. Mm-hmm. The two is Halloween Town and Zenon, and those are
exactly.
I mean, as popular as High School Musical is, that's past, like you just said, that's past my generation. That's one generation.
Right. I know that.
After me.
The generations come and go so quickly now,
sure.
Chris.
Sure. I'm well aware. I'm well aware. I wanted to ask you, so you said you do teaching at USC, correct?
Well, I presented the seminar at USC a number of times, and also at a lot of the other places. The place I've been mostly, which is the most geographically desirable, is the New York Film Academy, because they have a campus here, a whole building here in Burbank. So I much prefer driving to Burbank than driving to USC when I can avoid it, or Loyola, which is even worse. But I just try to share it as much as I can. But the New York Film Academy has been ideal, and the international sort of student body that they have there is particularly intriguing. And actually, of all the places that I've taught, it's one of the places where I feel the students really get the best, most crackling kind of hands-on situation, and that's what mine is. Mine's class it's called the Filmmaking Experience: Life in the Trenches. And it's about what it's like to really be there in the trenches. And that's why I use so many film clips, so that I can say, okay, here's what we did, and here's how we did it, because I have a lot of the behind-the-scenes footage and storyboards and previs and all of that sort of stuff. And I can really engage with them about, the real, what it's like when you're in the trenches and the bombs are going off.
A lot of folks, their attitude towards kind of putting time and effort back into the community is important to them, and is clearly with yourself that is something that's important for you.
It is, and it's something that I really love doing, and I love hanging out with the students as well. But also to try to inspire them to embrace this sort of humanistic approach that I have always tried to take in my work, particularly the stuff that I've written and directed. I say, yes, you can make a lot of money making Saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all of that sort of stuff. But I encourage them to aspire to, a little higher than that, to the work of the great humanist directors. My favorite of whom being Kurosawa, who is just. It's a master. I mean, if you spend a few days just doing nothing but watching The Seven Samurai and going through it frame by frame, as I have done over the years, you realize it has everything you need in sensibilities, in moral, in drama, in comedy, in action, adventure, in filmmaking. It's just an amazing piece of work. So I encourage them to sort of pay attention to that line of work and try to, be mindful of what they're bringing into their room for people to see on the screen.
I actually, so I somehow managed to see Ron before I saw Seven Samurai, which would probably make very little sense to so many people who watch Kurosawa films, because that's not the one you start. That's not the one you start with. That is way farther down the line than Seven Samurai, given how important Seven Samurai is to almost everything.
Yeah, it truly is. I was privileged to be at the DGA when they gave him their Life Achievement Award, presented to him by John Huston. It was quite an interesting room to be standing in, and it was really rewarding. But so I've always tried to look for projects that would allow me to do that. Zenon sort of came out of left field entirely. Suzanne DePass, who was the producer of Zenon, She has a wonderful history. She's the one that was Berry Gordy's right-hand person at Motown. Suzanne is the person that discovered the Jackson 5. I mean, it's like that.
Sure.
And she was a firebrand and really talented. She also wrote and got an Academy Award nomination for Lady Sings the Blues. And she and I hooked up, many, many years before Zenon, and we really had the same kind of sensibilities, and we had been looking for a long time for a project to do together. She had brought me some things that I loved, and I brought her some stuff that she loved. For one reason or another, the stuff never finally got made. But I got a call out of the blue one day from her saying, "Kenny, I'm in real trouble. Can you get on a plane and come to Vancouver now?" And she said, I'm 2 weeks into prepping this movie, Zenon. The director doesn't really know what he's doing and doesn't get it. And is there any chance? Where are you? What's happening? And I had just coming out of the editing room of another project. I've forgotten what it was now. And I said, sure, yeah, I'm there. And are we going to be finally working together? She said, oh, absolutely. I'm going to be here. We're going to do it. We're going to be with you and me. We're going to do it. Okay. And didn't quite work out that way. Suzanne, I discovered, is much more likely to be on the set when the EPK crew is there. But otherwise, she sort of shunted it off. And once I was there, she knew she didn't have to be there moment by moment, and so she could get on to other stuff that she was working on. But nonetheless, she was there through the process ultimately with me, and had some great notes. And it was, so I jumped into the middle of this Disney project, this Disney Channel project, and they still had not cast it. It was just beginning to in the design stages. A terrific production designer was involved, named it's going to come to me, Joe Garrity. Joe was the designer that had done a lot of Christopher Guest's movies, Best in Show and Waiting for Guffman and that sort of thing, and had a terrific sense of humor. And he was already beginning to design the sets, but basically it was like you had to hit the ground, running, and so they didn't have a cinematographer yet. So I brought in a wonderful guy named Ron Oreo, who had done a Sherlock Holmes piece for me, a Canadian DP who was working out of Vancouver, and he did a really wonderful noirish job on my CBS movie about Sherlock Holmes, and he was available and came into it. And so right away I was beginning to surround myself with people that I knew could get in sync with me. The trickiest part was me getting in sync with the way that the Disney Channel operated, because they tended to be kind of micromanagers, as a producer.
I think it's only got, from everything that we have heard coming out of their involvement with Marvel and Star Wars, it seems to have only gotten worse.
Yeah, there's a reason they call it Mauschwitz. It's a terrible thing.
I've never heard that.
Oh
before.
yeah, it's a tough place. I did a TV movie there for them, for Disney, back in the '80s, and in some ways they were supportive, but in other ways they seemed to be supportive. But at the end of the day, they said, well, you went over budget on this, and I said, well, yeah, but you approved it. Oh yeah, right. And I could show them the piece of paper, and even then they were denying
right.
it. It's like, what do you mean he won the election? What do you mean he won the election by 8 million votes?
Right. Proof? What is proof?
Yeah,
proof doesn't matter.
That isn't true. Yeah. So it was intriguing, and there was a couple of people there that were really just, I guess, directors they'd worked with in the past were used to being shepherded around by them and say, oh well, listening to, well, this is not the way we do it at Disney and all, and it took me a while to sort of let them understand that I knew what I was doing, that if they wanted me to keep on doing what I was doing, then they needed to just sort of back up a little bit and let me run with it. And it was challenging. We went around and around. I remember about the costuming, and because their take on it, and I gave them a little more than I liked there. I always thought that Stuart Pankin's costume for Commander Plank looked a little bit like something out of Gilbert and Sullivan. It was just sort of goofy. Where did that come from? and
especially for a gentleman of his kind of stature.
Yeah,
it's a choice. Let's just put it that way.
It was cartoony, is what it was. It was
really
silly, and and some of the script was a bit too. Although Stu Krieger had done a really interesting job, and there's a lot of stuff that I still find myself saying "Morning Glorious" sometimes. It's he found a wonderful sort of made up slang that was kind of fun, and I liked I'm very fond of female heroes, so having the fact that that Zenon was the kind of spunky girl that she was really appealed to me. The actress that they had sort of focused in on before I got there was Kirsten Storm, and they said we really love her. I think you'll like her. And I read her and had not really had at that time particularly much acting experience, and she had a lot of difficulty trying to make it happen. I really wanted Raven to play the lead because Raven was a proven and commodity and had been acting since she was like 3 years old, I think. And but they let me read a number of other kids, and but they kept coming back to, we just think she looks so right. I said she does look right, no question about that. But then they hit me with a line that there's always the danger one for a director when they say, you can get it out of her. And it's like,
sure,
okay,
it's on now. It's on you, Mr. Director man. The fault is no longer ours.
I said, look, I hear what you're saying. You really want her. Okay, look, I will do what I can. Give me like 2 or 3 days of rehearsal with just her and me ahead of time. Let's find a way to get that into the schedule so that we can do that. And she jumped into it. Kirsten did really wholeheartedly, and was very determined to try to make it work, and we did a lot of rehearsing together, one-on-one, went through scene by scene, line by line, and she took lots of notes, and she was, and I thought, okay, this could maybe all come together, and but then when we got to the table read, just about 2 days before we started shooting, and everybody's around and so eager to hear it, and the cast starts reading, and everybody's doing great, but Kirsten was reading it like she was reading it for the first time, and I went, oh my God, and the Disney people sort of went pale and said, wait a minute, so it was it proved to be a challenge, but she was determined, and I was determined to do the best we could, and so we just worked every day through every scene, through every line, one at a time sometimes, to get it focused down to exactly where it had to be, and it was a challenge. Working with young people is often a challenge, because the way that I like to work with actors, particularly with adult actors, is that we walk into a room and I know exactly what I want to do, Chris, going in. I have a feeling of exactly how the scene should play, how it should block out, who should move where, when. I have it all in my head by the time we walk onto the set. But when I walk on with adult actors and they say, well, what do you want us to do here, Kenny? I usually say, beats the shit out of me. What do you think? Let's see. How about you start over here and you start over here and let's see what happens. And then I snap back and let's see what happens, And sometimes they fall in exactly into what I had in mind. And other times they go 180 degrees in other directions, but it's better,
Right.
And they bring stuff to it, and that's the great delight and collaboration that you have when you're working with gifted actors like that. But when you're working with young actors who haven't had too much experience, and you say, okay, let's go. And they say, well, what do you want us to do here? And I say the same thing. Well, I don't know. Well, let's see what you want to do. Let's start here. And they say, but what do you want us to do? And it's like one of the things I have to tell my young filmmakers is that when you're working with young people, you've got to figure you're going to do a lot more work than you will when you're working with seasoned pros.
Sure.
And occasionally you will come across a young woman or a young man who are that 13, 14 age or younger, and who absolutely, like Shirley Temple, just are naturals and do it, and they do bring that extra to it, the extra mile to it. But Quite often you don't, and you're working really a lot harder as an actor and as a director to try to get the performance to where it needs to be. But overall, she really was determined to do a good job. She went on after Zenon to not only do a couple of more Zenons, I guess, but also got a running role. I think she's still on General Hospital, maybe. She was for a long time, I know, in the soaps, and so good for her. And a couple of the other kids really took off too. Greg Smith, who was playing the young male hero in the piece, her boyfriend, went on, of course, to star in Everwood for like 4 years, right after Zenon series, and then he became a director and directed a lot of stuff for The Flash and for I think there was a show up there called Legends of Tomorrow, and he also directed some Supergirl stuff. And he was a gem to work with, and as well as the adult cast was really terrific. I was blessed to have Greg Thurloway and Gwyneth Walsh and Holly Fulger particularly as Aunt Judy, who was a real spark plug. And it's and the bad guys were great too. Francis Coffin, whom we just lost a couple of years ago, was a fine foil for our young people, and so we had really surrounded them with the young people with a really strong cast. The other tricky part about working with 14-year-olds is trying to schedule, because you don't get them for as long as you need them. You got to shoot a 12-hour shooting day, and it's an enormous challenge, because when you're shooting an 8-hour day and you only have your lead players who are 14 years old for about 8 hours, out of which you have to give them schooling and R&R time, rest and relaxation time. The crew gets a half-hour meal, they get an hour. I mean, there are so many scheduling issues that you just don't have Zenon at your disposal all day long to go through and do the scenes. But she's in the whole movie practically, So and the same with Raven. It's how do you do it? And it comes down to having to use lots of photo doubles, where you're shooting her face when you've got to see her face, and when you're over her shoulder, it's not her shoulder, it's somebody else's shoulder, because she's off in the schoolroom at that point, and so that you the only time you can see the actor is for 8 of the hours, minus the time that you've got to give away. It's an excruciating challenge, and I frankly hadn't been able to figure out how Disney had been able to do so many of those movies before I got there, without everybody tearing their hair out because of the problem. When I did the second one for them, Don't Look Under the Bed, which was their Halloween movie for that next year, I was blessed to I had planned to cast the female lead for that one out of LA, where the talent pool was bigger, but we were doing some casting in Salt Lake City where we were shooting, and this young woman came in who read really well, absolutely looked the part, 14 years old and all of that, and then I'm looking at her resume and I'm seeing Brigham Young University drama department, and I'm going, wait a minute. And I said, how old are you, Aaron? And she said, do I have to tell you? And I said, well, eventually, yeah, so you might as well. And she said, I'm 18. And so that is like a gift from the gods. When you're doing a Disney Channel movie and you've got an 18-year-old who really does look and play 14, then you're in clover, because you've got her as an adult actor. Anybody from 18 on, you're in great shape. It's a scheduling nightmare, and you just have to be incredibly creative and incredibly fast when you've got the actress that you have to see on screen to make sure you're getting every moment you've got with her. But when I brought Erin Chambers was the redhead who played in Don't Look Under the Bed, and she was just a sensational actress too. She'd had chops, and she'd been in drama school for 2 years. She was a sophomore already at Brigham Young. the guy that we've cast as her leading man, Ty Hodges, he blew us away. He came in to read for the part, and he was just sensational. And we all just said, this has got to be the guy. And I said, how old are you? And he said, well, I'm 17. And I said, oh shit, close but not quite. I said, when do you turn 18? Well, it was about a week into the filming, so we had a big, nice birthday party on the day of his birthday, and gave him a cake and said, "Hey, congratulations, you're 18, and by the way, you're working all night tonight." So which is something else you can't do with a kid.
Yeah,
under 18.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, it's hugely challenging. But
as they say, there are laws against those kinds of things. There are laws against those kinds of things.
There needs to be. Of
course.
There needs to be laws against it, and but the other kids that we had out of Canada that were doing the smaller roles they were all under 18, and so it was constantly a conundrum of, okay, how are we going to spend 12 hours filming like we need to do to get this film in the can when we don't have the actors and actresses, and you just have to pick your choices and get your shots squared away. I always work with a shot list, so I know exactly what I've got to accomplish every day and exactly how long I have each of the actors before they pumpkin, as we say, and so you've just got to go through it with all of that in mind, and you end up compromising in some places, but we managed to make it work, and it came together really well, and it's so fondly remembered, which is one of the fun things about it. I think that kids just grew up watching and watch it over and over again, because it doesn't go away. When it's on Disney, they keep bringing this stuff back up over and over again, and
now it's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, and one of the things too that I learned, I'd been lucky when I did the Bionic Woman. I did a show with I needed a young woman actress, and she was very spooky, because she was a kid who had telekinetic abilities that she didn't know she had. It only happened when she was asleep, and it was really sort of a ghost story kind of thing. And we lucked into. I read two actresses for it. One was Valerie Bertinelli, who was then 13 or 14, already a little too sexy for the role, and because it was a role about the girl and her father, and it was a little creepy that using Valerie, but she read well. But the one that knocked me out was Christy McNichol, who was in a show then called Family, and Christy was like maybe 13, 14 at the most, and she was like working with a professional, long-time adult actor who you could give a note to and she got it and just ran with it, and but those are the Christies of the world were few and far between, and so but it's the ride that you're on, and you've got to figure out a way to make it work, and so we did. Also, we had very limited stage space because we were on this supposedly 4-level space station, and we were only able to build one small part of one small level. And I was constantly faced with how am I going to make that look as big and sumptuous as it needs to be, and we came up with ways of shooting level 1 with one set of lighting and signs on the wall, and then we'd change the lighting and make it a little darker blue or something like that, flip around a couple of panels so it looks slightly different, and put another sticker, a big sticker on the wall that said level 3. So so you're doing the same thing, using the same set over and over and over and over again, and it was challenging, but
economical.
Well, that's what you have to do. I mean, if you go back and look at the Andromeda Strain, the movie that Robert Wise did, and they're in this underground complex, and they're all different colored levels. Well, here's a newsflash. It's all the same set. It's just been repainted.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So which is obvious when you think about it. Well, yeah, duh, of course. But when you're there doing it, it becomes more intriguing. And how can you pull it together? Plus, we had the music stuff to integrate into all of it, and the musical performances that had to be integrated into all of it. And Suzanne was a big help there on that score in terms of getting the time and effort that and state recording time that we needed, because a lot of it all had to be pre-recorded, so that they could then lip sync it on the set, and it wasn't always the actors singing who were singing. The old trick of get somebody that can really sing and then put their voice into the mouth of the actor. But,
right. You can win Oscars doing that,
Yes, like My Fair Lady, for example,
or Bohemian Rhapsody. It doesn't take much to fool the audience, apparently, or the Academy for that matter.
No, it's intriguing when Marnie Nixon can do both Audrey Hepburn's voice in My Fair Lady and the voice for Maria in West Side Story. It's like it's a given. But as actually a quick West Side Story, the Jet song that Russ Tamblyn sings at the beginning of the picture, "When you're a jet all the way," that's not Russ Tamblyn singing. It's Tucker Smith, who played Ice, the blonde with the blue eyes, who was also a jet,
Right.
But he apparently, I guess, did a better version of it, and so Russ was lip syncing to Tucker, and to bring it full circle, Tucker was a stand-in for us on all of the years we did The Incredible Hulk. He was one of our go-to stand-in guys, so he was on the set all the time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was, anyway, trivia, but...
For you, obviously, now with something like Disney Plus in the public and people can access Zenon, I would say easier than they could before. I mean, there's less looking for it and you can kind of stumble upon it should you have never seen it before. Right. Have you seen kind of an uptick in kind of not notoriety surrounding it, but have you noticed kind of a change or people like reaching out to you more about it to talk about it? Has it kind of come full circle a little bit back to your career with Zenon?
Well, I certainly am aware that it seems to be a perennial that comes up. I mean, I've been teaching the filmmaking class at New York Film Academy, for example, for I guess just about 11 years now, and which is that's a generation really, in terms of kids, and it's always something that sparks them and stirs them. There are kids also that I'm teaching that have, like you, who were not born when I did The Bionic Woman or The Incredible Hulk or V, and yet they have seen those things because those things have become sort of iconic in their own rights and had grown into having a life of their own. That are constantly being rerun or trying to be reimagined, as they have tried a couple of times with when they tried to make the first couple of features based on The Incredible Hulk, and which were such disasters, and because they missed the point and the essence. And the same thing happened when they tried to remake The Bionic Woman, and they've tried to remake V also a couple of times, again without my involvement. And it's so weird, Chris, how they miss the essence of what made something successful. Where was the lightning in a bottle that made those original shows so iconic and compelling and lasting? It's amazing the amount of emails that I get from people around the world for all the stuff that I've done, including Zenon. But no, I think I've been lucky in my career to have struck a spark of not only artistic success but commercial success, where the work is popular and yet at the same time has some additional substance and underpinnings that you wouldn't expect. Like, for example, I hadn't realized for a long time how The Bionic Woman had been very iconic among the LGBTQ community. Why would that be? Well, because here was a person that looked like something on the outside, but on the inside was something else.
Right.
And and that really, really fascinated me, that whole aspect of it. And the other thing I have tried to do is wherever I could is to invest my time and effort into creating projects that sort of help to chip away at inequality and at prejudice and discrimination. That's where my whole Alien Nation series came from, obviously, and Zenon, of course, didn't really have those elements as much as some of the other things did. But what it did have were strong female characters, which were really have always really been important to me. I felt that the actresses of the world have been underserved for the most part, and I've always sort of been drawn to projects that give me a chance to have a strong female character who is not the wife, the girlfriend, or whatever, but rather the person that the movie was about.
Right.
And that was one of the things that drew me to Zenon right from the beginning. Here was this feisty, spunky kid, sort of an Anne of Green Gables on a space station, and it's it's a delight when you can do that and open people's minds up a little bit about the possibilities for females, and to be able to role model a little bit for young women, I think is really, really important.
Well, and to your point, I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that the two Disney Channel original movies that get remembered so fondly both happen to share something so obviously in common. They both have very strong female leads. And I mean, they're again, you were doing this before this was cool or this was a thing. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The industry now is I wouldn't say getting off on this, but they're a lot more aware of it now, and they're patting themselves on the back for it. And to some extent, my feelings are, you don't need to pat yourselves on the back. There have been people like yourself doing it this entire time.
Right. It's true, and it's really, really gratifying. I mean, when I originally created the Bionic Woman and the original script that I wrote for the $6 Million Man, where it became 2 episodes of $6 million, I left her alive at the end of it. Yes, she was in trouble, and she was like in a coma, and they were going to put her in a deep freeze or something. And the studio said, no, she needs to be dead. We want her dead. We want to do love story. We want her. No, we don't want a lot of bionic people running around. I said, guys, this is a mistake. This is a strong. No, dead. So I gave her a cerebral hemorrhage in the most advanced medical facility in the country, and so she was dead, right? And then the letters started coming in to Universal and to ABC saying, how dare you? What have you done? My favorite came from the head of the psychology department at Boston University, who wrote just furiously, how can you create such an important, powerful, iconic archetype and role model for young women, and then just toss her away so casually? This is crazy. And in addition to that, the network and the studio took a look at the ratings and what had happened when I did those 2 episodes of $6 Million Man, and suddenly the ratings went way up. And so suddenly they said, yeah, why'd you kill her off anyway? That was a bad idea, Kenny. Let's bring her back. Why don't you bring her back? So, we did. And it was wonderful because she really did become one of the very first role models for young women in international television.
Yeah, that and Bionic Woman and Wonder Woman, as far as I'm concerned, paved the way.
Yeah, that's true. Then the main difference, though, was that the Bionic Woman was not a cartoon or a comic book origin. She was a real person, and that's why Harv Bennett and I cast Lindsay in the role, because we wanted the girl next door that was a real person that everybody could relate to, which is what Lindsay was, and then she brought that to it. And it was, and that's part of the reason it was successful. But I've always been delighted to be able, whenever I had the opportunity, to push push forward the female actors, to give the Kirstens and the Ravens a shot, to give the Erin Chambers the shot on Don't Look Under the Bed, and to really let them run with it. And Disney, I think they always initially particularly thought that their prime audience was the tweener girls, the girls who fall into that early teen category.
Sure.
So that's why
girls that are my age now.
Yeah, that's right. So that they would draw in an audience like that. So I got to give the Disney Channel credit for doing that too, and to helping and it made Raven a star. I mean, she after Zenon, she really popped and had her own series, and is really, really strong. And one of the interesting moments I had on the set though was I'm the kind of a director that whoever wants to come to the set and watch is welcome to,
Oh, sure.
So the parents for all the kids were around, and I always let them hang out by the video village so they could see what was going on. I'm up working with the camera. I'm never in video village. I want to be right by the camera where I can look into my actress's eyes and we can really communicate. But I noticed that after one of the takes we did with the Raven, I was talking to somebody else, and I saw that her dad had walked onto the set and was giving her some notes. And I said, okay. And then it happened a second time, and I said, and the second time after we did a scene, and I said cut, and I saw Raven glance off. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking at her dad. Well, of course, because he knows her really well. She knows him. She's got a bonded connection to him. But I finally had to go to him, and I said, you know what? She needs to look at me. And for that to happen, you got to not be on the set. And I'm not, this is not get off my set. It was like, it was, and he absolutely got it. I said, I've got to be able to have Raven looking at me so that we can see if we got it together. She's got to trust me. And he was very gracious and said, no, I get it. I will let me fall back and go for it. And she got on board right away. But that was something else that I learned and passed along to film students is it's really better not to have the parents on the set, not because you don't want them to see what's going on, but because you want to make that connection as a director with your actor one-on-one. And because you are the two that are responsible for really making it happen, and they've got and the actress has to learn to trust you. So that was an important lesson I learned on that show.
How do you think that would have changed the final film if, say, it had just been swapped? Say Kirsten had been in Raven's character, and Raven had been playing Zenon.
I think it would have worked just fine. I mean, Raven was a sensational actress that brought a lot to her, even to the role she had, and was she was just more experienced, and I think it wouldn't have mattered at all. I mean, when I mentioned about in Don't Look Under the Bed, we cast Ty as the male lead. Ty's black, and this was right around the turn of the century, right around 2000, and at one point, and everybody did the Disney casting people, everybody loved him, and all the executives loved him and said, oh yeah, he's the right guy. But so now we're into the middle of filming, and I get a call one day. They said, how are you going to handle the end? And I said, what do you mean handle the end? He said, well, there's he gives her a kiss at the end of the movie, and it's a serious kiss because that's part of it's a main story point where she begins to think, oh wow, wait a minute, maybe I'm grown up more than I thought I was, And they said, how are you going to do the kiss? And I said, well, what do you mean? He's going to kiss her. And they said, yeah, but mumble fumble. Well, he is black. And I said, yeah, and they said, well, how's that going to work? I said, what do you mean, how's it going to work? He's going to give her a kiss. They said, well, we're not sure how that's going to play with the affiliates in the South. And I said, well, tell them to get a life and get on board. And they said, well, couldn't you shoot it a couple of different ways? I said, he's going to kiss her. It's a story point. And come into the 21st century, guys. And we did, and I only shot it the one way, and that's the way it is in the movie. And I don't think I ever heard any complaint about it ever. But it did astonish me that it was an issue at all with some of the people at the studio.
That's a shame, isn't it? That's not even strong enough verbiage, unfortunately.
No, it's just, I don't know. I'm just so far past that. It's for lots of reasons. I mean, as I said, I was born in Arkansas. All my relatives were in the South. My mother was born in Arkansas, and my father at the same hospital where I had been born. And I grew up in Washington D.C. because we had moved there, and then my mother and father were divorced. He stayed in Arkansas, and she raised me in Maryland, in Washington. And Maryland, incidentally, I didn't realize it until I was in high school, is a southern state. It was the Mason-Dixon line is the Pennsylvania border on the north side of Maryland, and Maryland was a slave state, and so there was a lot of bigotry in Maryland, not so much in Washington D.C. But in Maryland, in the surrounding areas, it was. I was raised around a lot of bigotry and a lot of discrimination, and my parents were also. My mother and stepfather were, virulent anti-Semites, and so I heard lots of hate phrases all the time, and slurs about people who were homosexual, and none. Oddly enough, Chris, it didn't stick with me. I didn't buy it. And because I had friends who were Jewish and friends who were black, and they were kids like me, And I've been fortunate in my career to be able to remember that and to use that as an impetus to sort of, as I say, chip away wherever I can at intolerance and prejudice and discrimination and just help to make the world more of what it has become and will continue to become. Thank God. It's we're in a different place now than we were, and yet it's still. I guess you can see it's still out there and lingering, isn't it? When they can threaten to lynch the black woman who is a attorney general in one of the states because she's black. It's like God. So it's an ongoing battle that we must enjoin together, Chris. But
I'm with you. I mean, again, I practice what we preach and not let anyone else tell us otherwise. Like you've said. I mean, again, you can't go through life, pretending like you're doing something when you're not.
No, that's really, and that's really a key point that you make. When I was I was trained in the theater at Carnegie, at the Carnegie Tech, now Carnegie Mellon University, at the drama department there, which was the preeminent drama school in the country then. No film, no TV, it was all just theater. And it had been established. The college had been started by Carnegie back in the early 1900s. And his motto, his seal, was on all of our school book stuff. You get book covers you put on your books, and I carried those books with those book covers for like 4 years, and I'm embarrassed that it was not until I was a senior that I really sat down one day and said, wait a minute, what does his motto mean? Because Carnegie's motto was very simple: my heart is in the work. And I thought, oh, I get it. If your heart isn't in it, then it can never be as good as it could possibly be, And so it was an object lesson to me that I have carried forward and pass along to all of my students too. That your heart's got to be in what you're doing, and if you compromise where your heart thinks you should be, then it's not going to be good for anybody. You've got to hold on to your moral compass, as it were, and try to do the very best you can, given the time and the money you've been given, and also to have a good time doing it. I think that's the two things I always mention to a cast and crew when we're working together, particularly if they haven't worked with me before, is I say we're here to do two things to make the most artistic and commercial product we can make, given the time and the money we've been given, but we're also here to have a good time. And that's the way I run a set, and that's the way I run my life, is to try to make people comfortable so that they can do their best work. And I love to challenge the people that I'm working with in a good way to get all of their spirit and creative juices flowing. And that's why I say to my actors, I don't know how we want to play this scene. Show me what you think. Because they may think of something that I haven't thought of, and And it does intrigue me when I will write a line and I will hear exactly how I want it said, and the pacing and the nuance and the tone, and then I get on the set with an actor, and an actor takes that line and reads it, and it's in a whole different realm than I ever thought of.
Sure.
And it's better, and I say, okay, that's great. That's how we're going to go. And it's great. And I think that I don't know, it's always fun to challenge creative people and get their juices flowing.
Well, and it really lends itself to the idea that you clearly ascribe to, that ultimately at the end of the day, the business that you are in is a collaborative process.
Well, that's true. It absolutely is. I mean, it's been said so many times, it's a cliche, and how we're one big family and all that. But if you really get into it, it really is what you're doing and what it's all about. And I was lucky to have the collaborations of Suzanne DePass in it, who really helped, particularly as far as the musical aspects were concerned. I had a wonderful editor that I had not worked with before, named Terry Stokes, who again had been selected to be on the movie before I got there, and who turned out to be just a terrific collaborator. And Phil Marshall, who wrote the score. He's the brother of Frank Marshall, as in Kennedy Marshall, as in Spielberg, as in all of that.
Oh yeah.
And Phil did a splendid job with the score for Zenon. And Joe Garrity, as I said, the production designer, was just a wonderful spirit to have around, and a funny, humorous guy that could figure out ways to make things make a dime look like a dollar, which is what we were constantly trying to do. As you always do when you're making a movie.
I was about to say that the production design on the film is really good for, again, ostensibly what many would see as a, quote, TV movie. And that comes with its own stigma, as it were, unfairly, I would say, because I don't think where a movie is shown automatically discredits the artistic quality of said film. That's unfair.
No. I my whole television career, I've always looked at it as I was making little movies, and right from the beginning at Universal, when I was doing the Hulk and the Bionic Woman and all, and particularly when I was directing them myself. I really was not one of those guys that said, well, it's for television, so it's got to be close up. I said, no. I've seen big movies shown on television, even back in the 4:3 aspect ratio days, where the big movies still held up pretty well. You could have a really wide shot with a little tiny thing moving in the middle of it, and people knew what it was going on. And so I always tried to make everything that I've done as a director, again, given the time and the money that I've been given, and it was challenging, but when you challenge yourself, then you come up with creative answers that sometimes end up looking better than if you'd had an extra $100 million. And I had lunch one day with Marty Katz, who had been at Disney and then went on to be one of the producers on Titanic. And I said, why in the world did Jim have so many problems on this movie? I mean, it's a huge thing. And he said, well, we didn't have enough money. And I said, wait a minute, you didn't have enough money? You had $250 million on Titanic. And back when $250 million really meant something, right? And he said, yeah, but it wasn't enough. It was like, okay, so, that's how it goes. None of us ever think we have enough money, even if we've got the budget for Titanic. But, you do what you can.
So I want to ask you regarding, Zenon specifically, are there any moments, on set? I know you talked about, working with Kirsten one-on-one early on. Were there any moments on set that really stick out to you as particularly a memorable story or anecdote that you may have from being on set with the crew and cast?
I don't think so. I think that there's not one or two that just sort of pop out. I think that the juice that Philip Rise as Protozoa brought to the project was particularly fun. It was fun to do the musical piece of the Zoom 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 song that we did, and really go through the choreography. We had a choreographer to work with, and he was just super, and so got into the whole thing. And the sense of humor that Holly Fulger brought to it too was really wonderful. She was just so quirky and exactly suited for the piece. And the fact that the visual effects came together as well as they did to help support the look of the movie, that was really an important element that where again we weren't working with a lot of money, but we managed to make it look really good, and that combined with Phil's score that he brought to it really brought the whole picture to life. And so there was, and I think the other way to look at it is, was there anything that I was terribly disappointed with? And there wasn't. By the time it had all come together, by the time that Kirsten and I had worked through each line and gotten it to where it needed to be, and the end result was so pleasing, not only in terms of the ratings and the popularity of the piece, but in terms of the staying power of it and the way people react with such fondness when they, my students, when they realize, oh, you did the Zenon? Oh, wow! I mean, those things really, it's what we're all in this business for, is to feel like we've actually reached out and touched people and given them some entertainment that really made them spark up and with enjoyment. That's great.
So tell me a little bit about how you landed the role of Zenon's aunt in the series, obviously the film series Zenon. Obviously, there were more than one. How did you land the role of Zenon's aunt, Judy, in Zenon?
Well, I auditioned for it, and I got the part, which is basically it. It's funny. Back then, you'd get your scripts. They'd print them out for you and they'd get delivered to you. Right. It wasn't all digitalized. So I remember when I first got the script, the binding on it, or, the cover page, I think it was for HBO or something. And I thought, great. And then I read it and it was for Disney, the Disney Channel. And I thought, me being me, wanting to be Meryl Streep me, thought, would Meryl do this? But anyway, I'm an actor, but I auditioned and I got it. And it is honestly the one thing I am most remembered for, because I've worked a lot, but the Zenon Aunt Judy is just, it's great. Well, like I'm doing an interview with you right now. Right. Well, I was going to say, I think it kind of speaks, it somewhat speaks for itself, right? In a way. It's funny you mention that kind of it's a Disney Channel thing. It's funny, we were talking about this when we were talking about a different Disney Channel movie. The pedigree of the people involved in these projects. If you look at something like Zenon, yourself, Stuart Pankin, Frederick Coffin. Look at something like Halloween Town, Debbie Reynolds. Disney was swinging for the fences, and they were landing a lot of well-known adult actors to be in these, what again would I guess ostensibly be considered children's programming. It's kind of interesting. I know. We were, the people I've worked with, through Zenon are amazing actors. A lot of them were also, we shot every movie in different countries. Right. So we never shot anything in LA. But they got some really fine talent. It was absolutely the most fun to do. And the producers were I'm still friends with them. Suzanne DePass and Suzanne Costin were the producers to Pass Entertainment with Disney. But, I've maintained a friendship with them over the years. So it was all in all a really terrific project to be part of. I wish they'd do another one. They've talked about that for many years, but I don't know that that's going to happen, but it'd be fun.
So tell me a little bit about, because obviously, this is going to be a little bit of a different interview. Well, I guess it's similar to the interview I did with Stuart Pankin because he was in all three as well. So let's talk about the first one a little bit. What was that? What was it like being on the first set? What was it like working with, Kirsten and Raven? And obviously there is that whole, you're on Earth for most of the movie, so you're not even getting to interact with a lot of the, space station cast until much later in the film, at least in the first one. So tell me a little bit what that was like getting to work with Kirsten and filming all those scenes on the futuristic Earth.
Oh, it was just a blast. It truly was. She was precious and sweet, and she's such a love, she was just such a tender little soul back then. She still is, but she was 12. And Raven was, you could sort of tell Raven was powerful back even then. She sort of had this intense kind of quality. Good, she just sort of stood, and she was very present. And anyways, she was really kind of wonderful. They were all wonderful. And then Margie, who was Lauren. I loved hanging out with the kids. It was fun. And then Stu and I can't remember, but on Earth, I was mainly with Kirsten and I don't know, some of the other gang. I can't remember. I can't remember, but it was just, we became very close, all of us, because we were sort of, we to film the first one, we were all in Vancouver, and we just became very close. And so with the kids at the time, they all had their moms with them.
Right.
So you become close with the moms too, and you get to know the moms. And it was just, and when you're filming on location, it's, you're sort of, you don't know anybody there. So it sort of creates its own thing with the cast and the crew. So you kind of hang out together.
Forces you to be family. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, it's just, all of it clicked. It just did. And that role for me was so much what I'm like, which was odd, but, just hating to fly and just kind of quirky and fun. That's how I raised my kids. It's like, I'm very much Aunt Judy-like. And it's very funny because with this nonprofit that I've created, True Beauty Discovery, about empowering girls to create their own beauty ideals, mm-hmm. I work now with I work with girls and I work with young women. And one of the speakers that we have coming up, her name is Priscilla Frederick Loomis. She's an Olympiad, and she's Olympian. And I had a talk with her about, she's speaking in March, and I had a talk with her about it, and she said to me, she's in the Olympics, right?
Right.
I found out about her from an article on CNN last October, and she said, I've been following you for years. She said, Zenon was my favorite movie in the whole world. So I'm finding myself with kids who would watch the movie. They're now adults now, who are like, they get so excited to meet me because I was Aunt Judy, and it's just really something, and it's fantastic. I worked a while. It was like maybe 8-10 years ago. I worked on a project with some. It was a short film, and one of the guys on it, who is now writing on Selena, he was just, they get starstruck, which to me, being me, is kind of funny because I am the least of a star person, but it's just the effect that it had, and that time was enormous, and I had absolutely no clue. Again, when I got the role, I thought, oh, okay, Disney movie, and it's fine. And I'll tell you what, I was with my kids once, and it was at a school picnic, in the summertime. The school was getting out, and there was a volleyball. It was in a big park, and there was a volleyball game going on. And the kids and I were walking past this volleyball game, and this one young girl's like, "It's Aunt Judy!" And I'm telling you, I got mobbed by a volleyball team, and my kids were just, they were flabbergasted. But I don't know. It was just fun, and that connection with young people, I love it. I absolutely love it. So
I think to your point, and this is again as someone who can completely understand and sympathize with a millennial, obviously, I get it. And you know, when I've watched Zenon, and again, it similarly to so many other people like you're talking about my age, it's an important film that we watched growing up. And it's something that clearly had a sizable effect on so many folks, myself included. But the way your character is written, and talking to you now, I would be leaning towards this even more. It seems like less of a character and just who you are intrinsically.
Well, I think sometimes, kind of, but I think sometimes as an actor, you come in and there are things in the character on the page that you connect with, mm-hmm. and that speak to you and resonate with you. And that's, Suzanne Costin has said to me over and over, when you walked in and you read for Aunt Judy, we knew you were Aunt Judy. She said it was a done deal. And so I think sometimes it's a connection with an actor and a character.
Right.
But yeah, I just got it. I understood, I just did. So, and that's kind of a wonderful thing that happens if you're, as an actor, if you're able to connect like that. It's fabulous, and it just makes it all the more fun.
Well, I think a lot of people my age wish that they had an aunt like your character in Zenon. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I think that does drive a lot of it, because your character in Zenon is the cool aunt. I mean, that's the way it's written, right? I mean, that it's written that way intentionally.
That's so funny. That's what Priscilla said. That's what she said. You were the cool one. And I have a young woman who's going to be on the website as an ambassador for us. She's a mm-hmm. makeup artist, and she calls me Aunt Holly. So, it's just, I love that.
Well, and again, it sticks for a reason. I mean, outside of your acting career, you're clearly, devoted to doing the right thing for a cause that I 100% am, a fan of, obviously, for so many reasons. And, that's something that we've talked about before on the podcast, are these Disney Channel original movies. And I would say Disney in general, for all of their flaws, which of course there are going to be, given it's a multi-billion-dollar company, they do have a general leaning to show in their films and TV shows very strong female characters. And Zenon is no different. And so I'm curious, as someone who is now, created a nonprofit to give women, give power to the women, more power, please, for the love of God, give them as much power as humanly possible, especially over their own ideals of beauty. How important is it to you, and how important do you think it is that, women are being given and are able to have these awesome opportunities?
It's absolutely important. And, we're at the beginning of it. So,
right.
I mean, we really are. And so to me, it's really something that needs to continue. I think for me, one of the things, again, starting the nonprofit, was that when I grew up, the women that I had to look up to it was a very narrow group, right? I mean, the roles available to women, the women who got the roles, and there wasn't much diversity within film and TV
right.
at all for women.
Right. Oh yeah.
And that fueled a lot of stuff for me, which wasn't good. It fueled insecurity. It fueled not feeling good enough. It really did. And when I had kids and I watched my daughter grow up, it was one of those moments where, for me to go through all that, it was me, and I can deal with it. It's fine. I've worked through it. But to watch my daughter go through that, years later from
right.
when I went through it, that was the time when I thought, well, this isn't, to see that, to see her, when a child is little, they're kind of in, they're forming who they are. But when you get to a certain age and you begin to express yourself, but you get confronted with these unrealistic images or this pressure to be a certain way, that's something that I really wanted to change, because I just think that messes with an individual and a child as they grow. So that was, so it's very important to me that things that I work on help, you do get to that point where I got to a point where the roles that I was doing after Zenon, but, in between I did do other things.
Right.
And it just, I don't know. I wanted to do something more. And that's why this spoke to me, to be able to create this digital platform for girls and women. So yeah, it's tremendously important. You can't, you just have to sort of keep moving forward and with an intention of doing good and shifting consciousness in any way you can. That's my thing. But, everybody's, we're all different. So it's important to me. And I know that with Suzanne DePass and DePass Entertainment, you look at the stuff that they've produced, it's strong. Suzanne DePass is kind of an iconic woman in Hollywood. She's Black. She's done some pretty amazing things. And she started her career. She worked with Berry Gordy, and
right.
She discovered Michael Jackson, and she and Suzanne Costin, the other producer on the series, the things that they do, it was important for them with Zenon that it was a girl, that it
Sure.
was a girl
oh, yeah.
who was changing the world, that it wasn't a boy, and that this girl was kind of a little superhero. So that was important to them, and I love that. I love their narrative for their company. I think it's important, and I think they've done some amazing things. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you totally did. And again, I would say, to your point, I would say, at least in the industry now, you're seeing, and I wouldn't say it's just like in the last year or two, it's been in the last decade at least, you are seeing what you're talking about, this shift of folks creating opportunities for other people. And it's less about taking the opportunities yourself. It's more about enriching the community as a whole with more opportunities.
I agree with that. And I think that this whole thing with the pandemic and COVID, it's really shifted that. I know that, I got to be honest, if I go on Instagram, if I go on Facebook, I'm not so big on TikTok yet, but I'm learning. If I see individuals I know who are actors who are, I love actors. We do we can be a little insecure, and, we like to be recognized, right? And I think this past year, this past year when things were so dire, and I would see somebody, random person on Facebook or Instagram promoting, it got very old to me. It just got sort of, my focus shifted a lot about, wow, what's important here? What's truly important? And what do I want to do with my life? So I think there was like this collective consciousness that started to happen that was already probably happening, but it really kind of fueled it forward.
Yeah, it was accelerated. I was of the same mindset that you are, and I had a kind of similar introspective journey during this pandemic as well. Because early on in the pandemic, it was, I think all of us were very much in an uneasy mental state, and I'm sure that there are very many people who are still struggling with it, and it is a problem, obviously. But yeah, it has made me a lot more introspective, and it has made me realize even more so, like you said, I was already realizing it, but it has pushed me more to be more vocal about the things that I care about, and to do my job at helping others who I can help to promote what they are doing, the good things that they're doing for their communities. And I think that that's important. Again, no one can do anything right now. The movies that are being made right now are being made in conditions that I would say are so strict that it almost, I would assume, takes the fun out of acting in a way. Because the free nature of being on set is gone for the foreseeable future, if possibly ever. So it is, like you said, there is this kind of collective awakening in a way to start saying, well, maybe there are some more important things to care about than just my own issues or my own selfish issues. I guess I wouldn't say selfish, but my own kind of things that are just me. I think a lot of folks, like you said, have really transitioned away from that, which is a good thing for everyone.
Yep. I agree wholeheartedly. So what do you do, like in your kind of year of self-reflection? What changes did you make, just out of curiosity?
Well, let's see. I came out to my parents, which was fun. So there was that. What else? I don't know. I was the kind of person for the longest time who I watched injustice happen, and I watched people being treated a certain way. And it's not that I didn't stand up. It's that I didn't stand up and I wasn't loud enough. And so now in the last year, I've been very vocal and very supportive of my friends who are going through stuff, both either financially, if I can help them, or non-financially through other means, helping promote whatever they're working on, stuff like that. But for me, it's made me realize less about the things that I need and the things that I need to be doing to help other people who need things. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's me. What about you? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious now, since you've asked me, I feel obligated to ask you the same question.
Well, I think this past year has really solidified my work on this nonprofit.
Sure.
And it's interesting because this past year, it really began to become its own thing, which was incredibly exciting. In the midst of a pandemic, starting a nonprofit is probably, when you think about it, it's like, really?
I feel like the only worst thing you could have done was try to open up a restaurant that does live music.
Yeah, I know.
or a bar or something to that effect, or a barcade where people are coming to play video games. I mean, that's just about as a kind of an endeavor that's an uphill battle.
It's at the beginning of last year, we're planning a fundraiser, and we were going to preview this pilot that we had shot, and we did none of that because we couldn't.
Sure.
And I think we were also gobsmacked by the whole enormity of it, that a year ago we didn't quite know yet, and it was intense. So my commitment then became, well, okay, what can I do, and how can I move this forward, and what are things that are important to me? What is important to me? Because nobody was acting either, so it just became something that I felt that, I looked at my life about what interests me, what do I like, what do I want to change, what would I like to do? And that's pretty much, I just kept moving forward with True Beauty Discovery and reaching out to more people because more people were available. So it just kind of became its own thing. It was just kind of amazing to watch that happen. And it's still amazing right now because we're growing, and it's exciting, and we're growing in a time, in the midst of something that's put a stop to a lot of things. So, but for me, it's about touching other people, helping them, touching them in some way that can make them feel better, can make them feel seen and heard, and that they're not alone. That's always been my thing, even as an actor. It's always about that. It's always about touching someone's soul or someone's heart in a way, whatever way that is. If it's through a sitcom or a Zenon movie, it's always been that for me.
Well, and like you said, there is this kind of aspect of this that I really hadn't thought about until you had just said it, which is, I would say almost, if you're taking the pandemic seriously, which, if you're not taking it seriously, I think at this point, it's a lost cause. It's almost 11 months into this. But everybody's lives have been stripped down to the bare essentials. I have not gone and done anything in a year. I mean, I've not gone anywhere. I've not gone anywhere and done anything. I've been at home, sitting in my house, working out in my house, reading, watching stuff, working. I mean, and what's weird is society has never been given this opportunity before. And like you said, you took an opportunity to further a cause that matters to you. But all of us being stripped down to our bare essentials, I would have thought more people would have taken an opportunity to do something good as opposed to complaining about not being able to do anything. Feels like you're kind of missing the point.
It does. Just maybe, I don't know. I think a lot of people, though, stepped up.
I agree.
I really do. I think a lot of people stepped up and kind of, once you kind of got out of it was terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it was terrifying at first. So I think, but I do think people stepped up, and I think it became, and you saw that. You saw the good in people and the kindness and the willingness to help. There was some ugliness here and there, but for the most part, I like to focus on the other.
Yeah, you and me both. So speaking of positive things, do you have any specifically positive memories from the first Zenon movie?
I loved being in Vancouver. I loved to go on location, actually.
Sure.
I loved getting to know all those people. I loved working with everyone. I loved working with Stu Pankin. He makes me laugh. He just makes me laugh. He's just one of those actors, one of those guys. I remember this one scene. Oh, I've said this before, but and I probably shouldn't tell this, but there was this one scene at the very end of the movie. The space station is going to blow up.
Right.
And we're on a, 10, 9, 8, we're on a timer thing. And we're all freaked out and scared. And we were doing our close-ups. They would do my close-up. Stu would be my eye line. And then you turn it around and do Stu's close-up. I remember for Stu's close-up, it was, they're tight on his face, right? And it's like 10, 9, and I don't know what dialogue he had, but I started to laugh. And you don't see me on camera laughing. Right. You just see him, right? And I just started to laugh because it's just, I don't know, there's something about his face. And he held it together and he finished his close-up. No help from me, by the way, but just moments like that, just moments, you're on a set and it looks all kind of slick, like press a button and things move. You have two guys on the outside of the doors closing them and open. It's just things. It was just fun. It was fantasy, and it just had such a good energy about it. So there were so many times that were fun.
It's very Star Trek of them to have people on either side of the door opening them. I was going to say that is very much the original series Star Trek, or I guess Star Trek in general. I'm assuming they probably still do it, but the opening of the doors by the crew members is pretty great.
Well, when we were in New Zealand filming, we were all another one who is fantastic is Philip Reese. Now, Philip's sort of Philip's doing a lot of directing now, I think. Right. I love Philip. He remains a really close friend of mine, even although talk in a while. We texted and emailed, but there was one scene where we're all in a space car. I don't know. We're all there, and I can't remember where we're going. Philip was there. I was there. I think Kirsten. I can't remember who else. And we're in New Zealand, and there's a car, and it's the space little car was on some boards, right? Sure. Some whatever, so that they could have guys on one. It's like a teeter-totter.
Right, to make it look like it's moving, right?
Yes. And that just was hilarious. It's just things like that, and then you're kind of back in the scene, and it's just such fun, and such fun going to those different countries. It was when we flew to New Zealand or South Africa. I think it was South Africa.
South Africa was the third one, down. Right?
Third one was South Africa, and with different ones we would fly in at different times because we had different production schedules. But with South Africa, I think a lot of us flew down together, And I hate flying. Right? But and they all know that. The whole cast
Sure.
knew how much I hated flying. But we're all in, I think we're in business class, not first. I can't remember. But there we all are, the whole troop of us. And when it would get bumpy, Stu would look at me, or Suzanne Costin would check in with me, or Kirsten would usually laugh, or, because I hate the bumps. So, but just to have that kind of, the third movie you're doing together, there's nothing better than working that way, in my opinion. That's why I loved when I did series. I loved that part of it, that you get to know the individuals you're working with, and there comes a commonality that's just the best. And I love that too.
So the first film is shot in Vancouver, right? And then the second is in New Zealand, and then the third is in South Africa. I mean, that's a pretty stark contrast, obviously. And like you said, as flying is not your strong suit, that's
a long flight.
Yeah, I was about to say that flight to New Zealand from anywhere in the United States is a long flight, regardless of East Coast or West Coast, frankly.
Yeah, that's a long, long flight. But God, we got to see these amazing places, really, and hang out together. When we were in South Africa, we were at a hotel, and they would do this. And it was right on the ocean, and we would have what's called sundowners. I don't know what that was, but it's a drink at sundown.
Sure.
And it was beautiful out there. We would just go out there and, just look at the ocean. And, oh, my God, South Africa's stunning. Cape Town is so beautiful. So those opportunities, they were amazing.
So tell me a little bit about the second one. So in the second one, you come back, obviously, as Zenon's aunt again, but now you're married to Commander Plank.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you approach the role going into the second film versus the first one, because the dichotomy between you and a lot of the characters is going to be somewhat different, obviously, given that you're now part of Zenon's family. Or I guess not part of Zenon's family, but more people are part of Zenon's family because of your interactions with them, especially Commander Plank, obviously. His relationship with Zenon changes because of your relationship changing with him. Tell me how if you approach the role any differently going into the second and third film.
I don't think I did. I mean, I think that, as the character grows, you're part of that growth. So it's not, it's not like, it was a difference to be married to Commander Plank, right? That was the difference. And so it kind of made Aunt Judy less lonely, kind of. I got married.
Was it the third one?
In the second one.
Second one, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I got married in the second one, not the first one.
Right. Yeah. In the second one, I think you're already married to Commander Plank. Well, hold on.
No.
It's the third one.
Oh, I should know that.
It is.
I'm married to him in the third.
Yeah,
one. It is the second one I got married to.
Yeah, the third one is where your character's last name is hyphenated.
Right.
Which is pretty great.
Big me. Yeah, that wedding was fun to do too. And okay, plus we have Mona May as the costume designer. I mean, for who's ever listening to this, Mona May she also was a speaker on our speaking series. She did Clueless, right? She's amazing. She did Enchanted. She did Never Been Kissed. I mean, she's just great. And so she did our costumes. So those fittings were absolutely, they were so fun. But when we were in New Zealand, when we'd have to get like something fast, New Zealand's really far. Right?
Oh yeah.
It's not like it's New York, or it's not like, it's far. So in terms of costumes, I remember my first fitting. It's, and there was a time lag, and I know that was very difficult for the costume department because of the time lag. But anyways, I'm sorry, I got lost in this, but it was just, so the second one, dating Commander Plank and then marrying him, and that wedding was fun. Filming the wedding, and I remember my wedding dress. I remember my earrings for my wedding dress. It was sort of the progression of the character, and it seemed very natural to me. It didn't seem a lot like
a Reach.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, to me, the character of and I said this on the episode, and it's not a knock at the actors who were cast as Zenon's parents, but the characters of Zenon's parents in the movie are unfortunately massively underserved because of how good your character is written and how good your chemistry is with Zenon. It made me go out on a limb and say there should have been more of you and Zenon together, because unfortunately her parents seem to be the kind of seem less of characters and more of kind of a plot contrivance to get Zenon to come down to Earth.
I think the first, I'm trying to remember, do we meet her parents in the first one? I remember the woman who played, I mean, they were different. I think in the second one, I remember the woman who played her mother was from New Zealand, right? I think she was from New Zealand. And then Rob Curtis Brown played her dad.
Yeah, Astrid Carr was played by Susan Brady, who's from New Zealand.
She was from New Zealand. And then we had Rob, who was in New Zealand with us. And then we had the commander,
John Getz, right?
John Getz. Here's what I remember in New Zealand: Getz and Stu and Rob and I. Sometimes, we'd all meet or have breakfast together in the hotel. And one time, they went on adventures, and there is in New Zealand a cave full of glowworms. So you go to this cave, right? Mm-hmm. You sign a waiver like, I won't sue you if I drown.
Sure.
I didn't do this, but Stu did with Rob and John Getz. And they apparently, and I remember talking about this one morning, that they were going to go. And I just said, I can't, this triggers a lot of issues for me. Claustrophobia.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
I don't think I'd be good at this. But they did this. They went, and I think that you had to climb down this thing in this cave, and they put you in an inner tube, and you float down a waterway, and you look at the glowworms. And I know, and I just had that memory of, we used to all hang out and talk about, because we were in this gorgeous hotel in New Zealand. It was absolutely, we were in Auckland in this just fabulous hotel. And we would hang out together a lot. I can't remember what your question was. It just had so many, New Zealand was maybe my favorite place just because it was so different than what I was expecting. And a lot of our crew were Maori,
right?
The indigenous people.
Yeah.
And they have a very kind of, it seemed to me, kind and good relationship, with others, as opposed to in South Africa. It was a different vibe. But New Zealand was just, I got to know a lot of individuals who lived there. It was just fun. It was all fun. It really was. But that's a wonderful country, New Zealand.
I was about to say, I've never heard anyone who's worked in New Zealand have a bad thing to say about New Zealand. And I've actually talked to more people who've worked in New Zealand randomly. I've only ever talked to one person from Lord of the Rings, kind of the thing that New Zealand is kind of known for now. But everyone I know who I've ever talked to that's worked in New Zealand for any sort of just not like random thing, but like, well, we're just shooting this in New Zealand. They've always had nothing but nice things to say about the country and the people as well. Oh,
just the best. And the best seafood ever, and the best wine.
Yeah, I'm
ever.
The quarantine lockdown has made, my wife and I used to travel before the whole COVID happened. And New Zealand wasn't on our list of places to go to, but after the pandemic, it is very much at the top of the list of places to visit because of all the good things that I've heard about it.
Fabulous. And they have this island. Remember one Sunday, I believe it's called Waiheke Island, just off Auckland, and they have a lot of vineyards there. It's like Italy, and you have to take a ferry to get there. So we took a ferry, and then we got there and rented a car. It was me, Philip Reese, Manny Cotto, Stu, I think Rob Curtis Brown, maybe Getz, I can't remember. But we went over and we spent the day traveling and going to vineyards, which was quite fun. And then we had dinner at this stunningly beautiful vineyard. Just, this great meal, but we had to get back because we all had to work the next day. And there was a storm. And but we had to get back. There was talk of, well, what if we stayed overnight here, which I was all for. But Manny wanted to get back. So we took a ferry. Okay, that was worse than flying because it was this storm. And you're on this ferry. It was horrible. And we couldn't be up on deck because it was you'd fall over and die. So we were all, below deck. And I just remember I was so scared. And Manny was with me and he's talking to me. He's like, it's fine. It will be fine. Everything's fine. But it was, we went on a lot of adventures in New Zealand.
So I wanted to ask you, because you've kind of mentioned it already once or twice, and you've talked about filming the 3 movies and kind of having a different experience. And I'm not going to ask you which one is your favorite, because I would assume it's the first one for a number of reasons. But you've already mentioned a little bit that working with your nonprofit that you started, you've run into people that have recognized you. Kind of and we talked about it a little bit, but what was kind of the moment you realized how kind of successful and how much Zenon had kind of permeated, at least I would not say millennial culture, but I think that's how it has to be addressed. When did you kind of realize that like Zenon was a thing then and then a thing now? You know what I mean?
I think when my son first got to college, he went to University of Santa Barbara, and my kids, P.S., were never that into Zenon. They weren't.
Not into it in what respects?
Well, it wasn't like, they weren't, they didn't watch the Disney Channel very much. So they watched it, but it was okay. And I don't think they quite realized it. But my son was in his first year at college, and he called me from a party, and he said, okay, this is so weird. He said, somebody put on the Zenon Zoom, Zoom, Zoom song. And I said, my mom's Aunt Judy. And he said, people freaked out, which was hilarious. Like, really? And he said, yeah. And then I remember another friend brought a girlfriend over, young actress I knew, brought her girlfriend over, and she met me and started crying. Now I remember I heard a friend met Vanessa Redgrave and started crying, and I get that. I don't get somebody crying to meet Aunt Judy, but so that was sort of a clue. And then I kept getting interviewed for it. Would get these requests to be interviewed, and that was another thing that I was surprised about. I thought, wow, really? And then consistently, when I would, when I work on stuff, right, and a lot with what I'm working on now with True Beauty Discovery, with reaching out to these individuals who, for our speaking series, that is another thing that I was surprised and a bit shocked that they knew me.
Right.
So I think sometimes you don't understand the reach that certain things have. And I did not, because, I've worked on the first season of Ellen.
Right. Oh yeah.
I was a regular on that. I did a show called Anything But Love with Jamie Lee Curtis for 3.5 years. I was on a lot of stuff, but nobody remembers me from that, right? Nobody runs up to me and it's like, oh my God, I remember you from Ellen. Nobody. Or, oh my God, that guest spot on CSI that I just saw rerunning, it was great. I don't get that. I just get it from Zenon. So,
and it's not like Disney pitched the idea to you as or when you auditioned, it was, this is going to be a thing that you are going to be known for. No, I thought it was a one. Right.
You do this, that's it. No, I never had. None of us.
Right.
Did. I don't think anybody realized, the effect. And frankly, I'll tell you, after the first one aired and came out.
You mention, that idea when you're talking about Zenon, that now you're recognized for it by, I would say, people my age, and you're talking about your son. That I think speaks to the quality of Zenon and a lot of those early Disney Channel original movies, is how much of an impact they made on someone like myself or folks like me. Because I would assume your son is probably close in age to me. So people of my age at this point, like, I can't help but wonder, and this is very maudlin, unfortunately, how many of them watch Zenon and wish that they had a mom like your character. Or, because that's kind of almost what the Zenon character in the film needs, is a mother figure who is sympathetic to her plight in a way that her parents aren't in the film. And that's why I think that's why the character of Aunt Judy is still resonates with so many people, and I think it is kind of not sad in a way, but you could view it as maudlin in a way, if you know what I mean. You mean that what you're saying is that a lot of kids don't have that level of understanding from a parent? And like I think that's the one of the smartest things about the character, and you clearly brought that. I'm sure there was some of it was written, but you clearly brought it to the role, is that level of understanding that Zenon's aunt has for Zenon that you clearly don't get from very many, if any, of the other characters in the film. Yeah, it's unfortunate, and it's unfortunate that I think a lot of parents are like that, which is really too bad in a way, and that's something. Being a parent, you do the best you can, and you will mess up. It's just a given, because you're a flawed human being, and there are things that you will do wrong. So, but there are things that you will do completely right. But for me, raising my kids, it was just about listening to them and honoring who they are, and hearing them out, and just supporting them and who they were as individuals, because they're both very different. My son, who's 25, is very different from my daughter, who's 22. They're very different human beings, and that's just them. And they're extraordinary, and they're my favorite humans. Right. And they're just my favorite humans. I love them. And I think parents are like that. I think it's hard to be a parent. It's hard, it is easier being a cool aunt than it is being a parent. Let's face it. They get to go home at the end of the day. They don't live here. They do. They don't have to. They don't get that stress. They don't get that. Right. So it's. But I think it's hard to be a parent. It really is. And I think that. But the best thing you can do is just to love your kid and love them and who they are. And that's hard for people, right? It's just, why is that? I don't know. It's just, maybe it's that. I don't know, as a parent, you go through stuff and you think, well, this would be better for them. Yeah. I remember my daughter is a dancer, and she took ballet from the time she was 3. And she went to LACSA, which is an art school for dance. And she was an amazingly good dancer. And she was 18, and she didn't want to dance anymore. And there was a moment there, I couldn't, I thought, no. You're going to dance. No. And it did get to a point where she said to me once, "You're not listening to me. I don't want to do this anymore." And so I think all parents fall into that, where we think this would be a better way. Right. But it's not the way they want. So. Well, they have to. It's a fine line. Yeah, they have to forge their own path too. And again, that's why I give a lot of credit to yourself and credit to Disney for really taking it upon themselves to write movies and television shows about young people who are finding their own way in the world, and they're surrounded by supportive people. Because my hope always has been that by creating that kind of content, it hopefully permeates into reality. And I think that, like someone myself, saw those kinds of things growing up, internalized them, and whenever my wife and I decide to have a child, that's going to be part of my learning to be a parent, is what you said, remembering the things that were important to me when I was growing up that I wanted to make sure I helped instill within my own kids. And one of those is, like you said, listening, being there for them, but also understanding that, like you said, they are their own person, and the decisions that you or I would make in regards to our children's lives do have an impact. And not only do they have an impact, but they may have such an impact that it could be either impact in a positive direction or a negative direction, depending on perception.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. You'll be a good parent.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. It's just one of those things where when you watch stuff like Zenon or Halloween Town, especially now at my age, it's less about watching. It's less about watching what the kids do in the movies and more about watching what the adults do, because the way that the adults are interacting with the kids, I think as an adult watching something like Zenon or Halloween Town, you're watching it for the nostalgia value of it, but you're also watching it to kind of maybe pick apart in your own mind, why do you still watch this? Because, I mean, some people are just watching it for the nostalgia, takes me back to feeling like a kid. But there are people, myself included, who watch it and actively try to introspectively understand what drew me to this and why am I still watching it, 22 years later.
Now, did you ever watch Hannah Montana or Lizzie McGuire or any of those?
So those were a little, I want to say Lizzie McGuire was a little, well, I think Lizzie McGuire would have been on when I was at the right age. I watched Even Stevens instead, and Hannah Montana was a little past where I was. So I'm 30, so I'm a little older than your kids. So Hannah Montana, okay. I want to say Hannah Montana, if your son is 5 years younger than me, that would have put him at that right age to watch stuff like that. But I didn't either, because I would have been probably 13 or 14 at the time, and I had kind of moved on to other stuff. But I mean, when Zenon came out, I was 9, so I was smack dab right in the middle of the age range of the people that they wanted to be watching it.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, it's made for people 7 to 12. I think Zenon was made for not like children, but not necessarily teenagers. It was like the young right. Adults is the colloquialism that they use, for at least in literature. So it's interesting because I to kind of bring this interview all the way back around, I think my generation, the millennial generation, we have a lot of unpacking to do regarding kind of who we are and where we want to go, especially after, post pandemic, when everyone's going to kind of come out of a 1 or 2 year nap or, isolation, however long it'll end up being. But I hope that the world takes a moment to, ask, why do I care about the kind of things that I care about? What's driving me? And how can I do a better job at helping make the world a better place? Like you have, because again, like you said, this is a pandemic. For all intents and purposes, you could have done nothing. There are so many people that have just said, okay, well, pandemic, I have nothing to do right now. I'm just going to sit and hang out. But it's awesome to hear, someone like yourself not only walking the walk, but talking the talk. And I think that's really important.
Thank you. Same to you. It's truebeautydiscovery.org. And our speaking series are terrific for those of you listening. If you want to sign up to be part of it, sign up for some of the workshops that we have coming up, and just kind of keep a lookout for us on all our social channels as well. Our next speaker is Naomi Grossman. She was on American Horror Story. She played the Pinhead, and her lecture is February 13th. And it's called Excuse My Beauty, because when you see Naomi, look her up online. Her headshot, she's beautiful, and that character. And she talks about playing the ugliest character on TV and what that was like. She's very interesting, and she's very funny. And our April speaker is a young woman named Asia Mayrock. She wrote a book by herself about bullying, and it became a bestseller. I've got the book close by. So she's going to be our April speaker. Wait, and then Priscilla Frederick Loomis is our March speaker, and she is an Olympian, and she and her story is amazing because she competes for Antigua and Barbadu, I think is how you pronounce it. And she was told, I mean, her journey to become an Olympian was fraught with being told she was too fat, being told she was too skinny, being told she was too big, too muscly, too this, too that. And she's amazing. She's just amazing. So I get to interview and talk to all these cool people. And this past month, we had Anna Sitar on, and she's this unbelievably famous TikTok star. And I'm meeting all these young people, these young individuals, and it's absolutely amazingly fun because I found that, working with kids on Zenon, and I love it. I love it because there's such an authenticity to young, to kids and young people. And that I love. I love connecting like that. It makes my heart happy.
Tell me a little bit about how you initially got involved in acting.
I kind of, as a kid, I used to enjoy, performing in front of my parents and my relatives, at dinners and stuff. In college, I was going to be a psychology major, but I knew that there was something in me that wanted to act, and I auditioned for the first play as a freshman, and walking across a dark, scary campus into the audition hall, and it was worth it. I mean, that's what started me at college. As soon as I got into the drama, well, we had no drama major in Dickinson, but my good friend in the theater department, or the theater, he suggested English is the best major, so I did that because there was no theater major. But I fell in love with my director, Dave Brubaker, at Dickinson College, and we were friends and colleagues up until the day he died. So that's what got me into it, college.
So I have to ask you, as someone who also had a teacher make a large impact on them, kind of at a formative age, do you give a lot of credit to him?
He was the first. I mean, he was a remarkable guy. He was an actor. He worked summers at a playhouse. He got me a job at the Allenbury Playhouse in Pennsylvania, and he acted. He was like the lead actor there for years and years and years. But yeah, I credit him with. If I had a lousy teacher, I probably would still be interested in acting. But it was just a blessing and a cherry on the cake to have somebody as charismatic and as great as Dave Brubaker was. So yeah, I give him a lot of credit. And then just jumping ahead, in later years, I worked with my wife in a theater company in Pennsylvania, and Joe Riley, dear friend and director, Father Thomas Devereaux, producer, dear friend. I mean, those are the guys that kept me going, not to mention all the other stuff that I fell into during my sadly long and tired life. If you look at television movies, you don't see a lot of people like me on it. This is a young person. It's become a young person's industry now, which is fine. I mean, I had my time, and I'll let the youngins get it. If they call, I still do things like, Zoom play readings now in the pandemic, and if they call, I'll act. I mean, but yeah, to look back over what I've done, it is gratifying, and I'm very happy for it. And I've never really felt that I was ever burned out or going to be burned out. I mean, I was, you get older and your passions fade a little bit. I mean, I was absolutely passionate about acting. I thought of nothing else from college until well into the 2000s. I mean, really passionate about it. No, I'm not so passionate about it because I don't do as much stuff. But hey, if anybody's out there wants me to act, I'll do it. I'll work cheap.
Well, you probably just perked up a lot of ears when you said cheap. Looking back on something like Zenon, it came out in 1999, 21 years ago. Have you? Sorry. Have you? With it going on to Disney Plus recently in the last couple years, have you noticed kind of more people reaching out to you about it, talking to you about it, or is Zenon kind of one of those things that if you've seen it, you know about it, and if not, it doesn't come up very often?
That's a good question. It's on Disney Plus. I was telling me, I don't think I have it.
Oh yeah, big time. All three are actually.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I haven't seen a penny. No.
Well, hey, you know what? That's. I think you should see any money from it because that's the way residuals work.
That's right. Well, the first two Zenons, as I recall, were buyouts. Was a Canadian buyout. And the third one, I think, was an American SAG contract. So there was a few pennies dribbling in. But as far as people, when I used to be able to go out. Remember those days?
I do, somewhat.
When you could actually go out. Kids would come up to me and talk about Zenon, Commander Pankin, on all that stuff. But not a lot. I mean, to be honest with you, dinosaurs. I'm looking here on my desk, and I've gotten anywhere from 2 to 4 Funko Pack or autograph requests a day, and mostly dinosaurs. Not so much Zenon, although I do get some autograph requests. They send pictures of Zenon and Commander Pankin and Holly. But to be honest with you, not a lot of response for Zenon. I think is what you said. You either know about it, like the kids knew about it, or you don't know about it, in which case, well, the hell with them.
Again, as someone who grew up and saw Zenon at the perfect time, Zenon is a television movie based off of a children's book about a strong female character. So one would assume it has a place now in current culture because, again, as far as I'm concerned, women, empowering young girls is very important, and it was nice to see something in 1999 doing it. And it's a little unfortunate that this wasn't kind of brought into that conversation because, again, Disney's early on Disney Channel original movies had a lot of strong female protagonists.
Right,
look at something like Zenon or Halloween Town even.
Right. Look at Cinderella, for God's sake. She was a beast.
Yeah, exactly. Strong female protagonists are kind of Disney's bread and butter, it would seem. Yeah. A lot of it. So tell me a little bit about how you initially got involved with the first Zenon film.
Well, I actually remember the audition. I auditioned for it, and got it. And actually, because it was a buyout and not a lot of money, I wasn't sure I wanted to take the time to go up to Canada and do it. Luckily, I did. But that's how I got involved with it. It was real simple, real straightforward. I auditioned for it and I got the part.
So I was just curious, kind of any memories that you may have working with any specific crew members or the cast, any kind of stories that jump out at you from the first film?
That's a good question. I remember Kenny. I remember riding around with him, maybe going to locations. The crew, it's a long time ago, and we didn't really hang out with the crew. I didn't hang out with anybody. I think I had leprosy and everybody wanted to stay away from me.
Hopefully that's cleared up now. I
just, like I said, I remember Holly. We became friends and hung out a lot for all the movies. I remember Kenny. I remember I went in for doing some ADR, some looping, and I had written a song about Zenon Carr, which I won't sing. I'll send it to you, but I won't sing it for you. And he was very sweet. He said, okay, let's record it. And I did. I recorded that song during the ADR session. So I remember that. He was very nice about that. Beyond that, as far as the first one, I know it was in Vancouver. And I know that, like I said, I enjoyed it, and I have nothing more to say to you.
Well, that's the interview's over. I guess I've got to go.
Now, who was the second director? I remember Kenny. I remember Manny Cotto.
Manny Cotto, who would go on to be the showrunner for Dexter.
And he's now producing another show, The Bastards Never Called Me, and that's okay because I know where he lives, and I'll get him someday.
He'll just hunt him down. Stuart Pankin is out for blood, which is fine. I mean, hey, all right, hey, you heard it here first. And I don't. Let me look at. I didn't actually look at who directed the third one. I knew that Manny Coda directed the second one, and the third one was directed by Steve Rash.
Steve Rash. Again, I know all these guys, but we never. Manny, actually, the first day I got to New Zealand and I didn't want to go to sleep because I wanted to stay up because of the jet lag. Me and John Getz and Rob Curtis Brown, who we later became very good friends, we spent a day together just so I could, so we could all just stay up. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And just try to stay up till 8 or 9 o'clock, and so that was very pleasant. I remember we went and we saw some stuff in where the hell was it? New Zealand. And we had some meals together, and he seemed to be a really nice guy. And I probably remember Manny more than I remember any of the other people. I don't know why, but New Zealand was it was very pretty, and again a really nice. They're all nice experience. I can't, I'm very boring. You're not going to hear any. That.
So let's talk about the first and the second film, because you mentioned the first film's obviously filmed, like you had mentioned, in Vancouver. The second film. New Zealand?
Right. Second one was in New Zealand, and the third was South Africa.
Huh. That's a hell of a change.
It is a change, and it's actually lucky we got to South Africa because they were looking into the Film Commission of Bangladesh. They went to save a few bucks, and I'm kind of glad they didn't do that. So we ended up, in South Africa for the third one.
Wow. So when you mentioned you were in you're in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Those New Zealand scenes. I mean, if you didn't even know you were filming in New Zealand, I guess a lot of the audience wouldn't have realized it. I mean, again, It didn't. What was that like being on location?
Fine. I mean, except for the travel, which I hate. It was fine. I mean, like I said, John and Rob and I became friends. We actually, took a weekend to explore the North Island. We went to all kinds of places. So that was great. Those friendships they remain to this day, not to mention Holly. But New Zealand was, when you're working, you don't get a chance to see a lot of the country. But I remember it was interesting. It's always interesting to be in a different place, different culture, different sensibilities. So it was all great. But for the most part, you spent a lot of time in the studio. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Oh yeah. Oh sure. So when you initially read the script and you were, when you got the role for Commander Plank, kind of was there any performances or anything specifically that you wanted to bring to the role of Commander Plank?
I guess thinking back on it, I guess I needed to be, commanderial. I mean, you had to be commanding. I didn't want to. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I didn't want to go into the cliche of the stern officer. I wanted to try to get as much humor and softness in as possible. And luckily, to help that, they gave me a relationship with Holly, so that could show the softer side of the guy. I mean, I just wanted to. I don't know. I just wanted to know my lines and come in on time and collect a paycheck and go home. No. That's cynical. I do remember that I had a long speech, and I didn't know when it was going to be filmed. But I memorized it. I try to memorize long speeches, ahead of time. And I got to the set in New Zealand. They fitted me with my silly purple costume, which so many people comment on. And the
costume is pretty great. I mean, it's pretty far out, man, as they would say.
That first one, yes, that first one.
As in the first one, that costume is pretty far out, man. I mean, it's
yes, exactly, and sold it to Ringling Brothers right afterwards. No,
I wouldn't. I'll just believe that wholesale. I do not doubt that at all.
I could. Somebody said to me, because Zenon was kind of popular for a long time. He said, if you had that costume, you put that on eBay, you could make a fortune, and they're probably right. But anyway, to finish,
I would agree.
The story, I memorized this long speech. I got to the set, and they said it might have been the same day or the next. They said, we're going to film that scene now. Probably the next day, they wouldn't have been that cruel. But I was very, very happy to have learned that speech, because that was, I think it was my first shot, was standing up in front of a lot of people doing this long monologue about the space station or whatever it was. So I remember that very clearly.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I believe that's near the beginning of the first film.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the sets, because when I spoke with the director, Kenny Johnson, he said that they definitely made use of these sets the best that they could. Did you get a sense of that when you were at least on the first film on the space station sets?
Yeah, the sets were actually kind of nifty. I don't remember the first one a lot, but I remember they put a lot of effort into it. I remember the second one a lot. They had an actual round a set, like you're walking around the space station. I mean, they put a lot of time and effort into those sets, and it, like a good costume and a good set always helps an actor, especially if you do something science fiction-y. You gotta, everybody, audience and actors, have to believe the space that they're in, and they did a great job with that.
So, like you've already mentioned, you were obviously involved with all three of them. Of the three, thinking back, obviously, it is, like you've mentioned, it is quite a while ago. When you were done with the third one, was that kind of, okay, we're all done here? Was there any room for something else, or was that kind of the third one is the end, and that was all that was asked of you?
Well, yeah, except they had plans. Disney had plans to make a series of Zenon.
Did they?
Yeah, and maybe another movie, but then something happened in the world. I don't know what it was. It might have been 9/11. I mean, something happened that all those plans were scrapped. So we were, for about 3 seconds, real excited about coming back and doing a series for Disney, or a movie, a long form. So when it was over, I don't know if they told us that before we finished filming the third one. If they did, then it certainly, at least for a while in our brains, wasn't over quite yet. And then it did become over. But at the end of it, we were, we'd be happy. We're happy to stop. We'd be happy to come back and do another one. So that's the behind the scenes of that.
It makes sense in a way, because again, they have a captive audience, and they clearly have a series that is immensely popular if they're going to make three films as opposed to just one.
I think you're right. I think it was popular. Well, you know more than I do, but I think it was tremendously popular.
Did you get a sense at the time when these films came out from 99 to 2004? How was it received then? Do you remember,
I think
what that was like for you?
I think very well. They had Zenon products, Disney products, and shirts and magnetic stickers, and I think that people really responded to it, and which is why obviously they kept making more. Which is why I believe that they were really planning to do a series, because I think it would have been. I think it would have been very successful had they done a series on Disney, but it was extremely popular at the time. That's what I remember.
Sure, and again, you're not, from what I can tell, you're not remembering incorrectly, because they made three of them. So.
Right, exactly.
So you've obviously worked with Disney on several occasions. What was it like working with Disney the first couple times you've worked with them versus working for Disney on something like Zenon? Because some of the other stuff you've worked on with Disney has just been your voice. Other times it was you on screen with something like Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves. What was it? Right. What's it like working with Disney? Because I've heard stories, so I'm curious as an actor what it's like working for Disney.
Well, to be honest with you, Disney never. I mean, I hear a lot of stories too about Disney being tough on actors, but they were never. I mean, they never impinged on me in the least. I mean, and they kept giving me work, so. I was very happy about it. No, there were no problems with Disney. I mean, like I said, because of Dinosaurs, which was, I guess that was Disney.
ABC Disney, yeah.
Yeah, and then that led to a lot of voiceovers, because I got to meet the voiceover people in the Disney office. And Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves came in there, in between. No, Disney been very, very good to me. So I got no complaints about Disney. I know other people do, but I don't.
Is there any kind of memories that you have from when Zenon came out? I mean, you've talked about it a little bit, but were there any memories that you had, regarding Zenon, or kind of any positive experiences? I mean, specific positive experiences you had surrounding working on any three of those films? You've already kind of mentioned your friendship with John Getz and stuff like that, but any other memories that jump out at you?
Well, the memories are the travel. I mean, we got to go to some interesting places. That was nice. And the producers, I think Susan Costin was one of the producers. They were always very nice to us. We sort of hung out together. The friendships, like you say, and the people, the actors on the set, and the Canadian crew and the Canadian people who worked on the set. I mean, it was all sorry, Chris. It's all positive.
Sure.
It just was. I mean, and as an actor, I mean, to this day, you're just happy to work. You just, you wake up in the morning and you say, "Wow, I'm working. I'm in South Africa, whatever." So the entire experience, and was great every time. I got the first movie, that's great. Then Jesus, the second movie, then they wanted to do a third movie. You understand how exciting that was for.
Oh, sure.
I'm not saying I was a baby, but as an actor, it was great. It was just great.
That's a little bit of job security, right? A lot of job security.
Yeah, I mean. Look, as well as an actor, when the job's over, he thinks he's never going to work again. But they were to do 3 of those movies was swell. It was just swell.
So you've already mentioned it, and I'm going to use it as an opportunity to ask you a couple questions about dinosaurs. But I wanted to ask you about, because you've mentioned voice work, and correct me if I'm wrong, but how you initially got involved with Disney. DBA and anything else that they were doing, but you got involved with Disney through dinosaurs, correct?
I think that's one of the earlier projects that got me involved with Disney.
Because I know you did like Darkwing Duck and some other things, but that was probably not as high profile as something like dinosaurs.
Oh no! I mean, I remember doing Animaniacs, which actually they're doing more of them now. That was, I guess, that was Disney. That was kind of high profile. But I did a lot of these little cartoons, including Batman and Superman and all that stuff, that were tremendously successful. Not because of me, but because they were successful. But it all started with dinosaurs and meeting. I think his name was Jamie Tomlinson, who was head of the voiceover department at Disney, and he happily, got me involved in a bunch of those things. So that's where that started.
So tell me a little bit what it's like for you doing voice work versus, going and getting on a set and then acting in front of cameras. Because I've heard a lot of actors talk about it, but I'm curious, someone as yourself who does have a prolific voice acting filmography, kind of what's that like for you? Contrasting between on-set versus voice acting?
Well, first of all, Dinosaurs we replaced the voices of the puppeteers. Henson usually, if they controlled the puppet, they usually did the voices. Right. This is very different from Henson. And the first puppeteer actually, I won't mention his name, but he was not happy that he wasn't doing the voice. I auditioned for it and didn't get it. And the guy that eventually did it was a little English guy who talked like this, honey, I'm home. Fran, what's for dinner? So they didn't want that voice. So I
can't imagine why not.
Yeah. So we all of us replaced the voices of the puppeteers. So we had to lip sync. It was a little less creative than going and doing cartoons because you had to adhere to the rhythms of their voices and how they created each individual line. You did the best you could, and I think we were pretty successful at it. Now with voiceovers, the director obviously is there giving you notes, but you create the character. You create how you want to say the line and the rhythms and the volume and the pace, and that's pretty creative stuff. And then they draw the cartoon to your voice. So that's a big difference between dinosaurs and voiceover. Voiceover work is sway. You go there, you can do it naked. Nobody cares. You're in a studio, and of course, a lot of people objected to that. So I bought a bathrobe, but that's a big difference. I mean, you go in and you're working with wonderful people. I mean, Mark Hamill was there, and Rob Paulson, and a lot of these, Jim Cummings, Frank Welker, these big voiceover guys, and you sit there and you watch them and you enjoy them. I mean, I've seen voiceover guys like that Charlie Adler, they jump from character to character. I'm doing it bad. He was, hello, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are, and, line by line, they'll jump back and forth between these characters, and it's kind of fun to watch. And as far as my work, I just was given usually one character, and I enjoy doing it.
So, again, as someone who is a massive fan of dinosaurs, I don't think I can't ask you questions about dinosaurs at this point. What was your inspiration for the Earl Sinclair voice?
Well, there was, everybody says it's the Honeymooners. I never thought about Jackie Gleason for the voice. There was an actor named Davy Burns.
I feel like that's a lazy comparison.
Yeah. There was an actor named Davy Burns who was on, I got to know him in a movie called It's Always Fair Weather. It's a wonderful, wonderful movie. And he sang a song, "Though the times are all for parting and the marsh." So I kind of used that as a basis for the character. And it went back and forth, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, when they wanted it very rough. They wanted it a tough. And I kept thinking and saying to them, he's a lot more than that. But they said, oh, he's a big dinosaur, so it's got to be like that. And it turned out that wasn't the best choice. And when I did it the way I wanted to do it, quite frankly, they said, yeah, that's the way it should be. So it was a much more, he jumped back and forth from being Fran to, honey, I'm home. It was that kind of thing. But Davy Burns was the beginning. But the script is what you got to use to come up with that stuff. If you follow the dictates of the script and you try to fulfill the needs of the script on the writers. But that's a long answer to a short question about how I came upon that voice. I'll tell you, man, it was. Every actor in Hollywood auditioned for that part, to be honest with you, because it's a great part. So I can say voiceovers is a great job for an actor, because you don't have to get dressed. You come in, you do your job, you go home. And I was very, very honored and happy to get that part. I mean, it was kind of life-changing for me.
Well, and it's also on a TV show that was so technically, was such a technical uphill battle that they've never done something else like it.
No, they told me that at one point it was maybe to this day, the most expensive half-hour television show ever, because
I believe it.
Because of the animatronics and the maintenance for the puppets. And well, once they built the set was great. But they said it was an extremely expensive show to do, which is one of the reasons why they didn't renew it. I mean, people keep asking me, why don't you do more? Well, that's the reason. I mean, I think it was money, because it was I love it. I thought it was a terrific show, good for adults, good for kids, and that ending, the last episode, was amazingly memorable and controversial.
So thank you for bringing up the ending, because as a child growing up at that time, and I remember watching the show, I was one of, as I would assume many of my generation, never saw the ending of the show until we saw it. Oh my God.
Yeah. It was. Wow. I mean,
it's a kick in the teeth.
It is a kick in the teeth, and a lot of people, I don't remember the details. I guess they got some letters saying, how could you do this to my kids, kill those dinosaurs? But if you think about it as an adult, it was kind of perfect. It was, you know what I'm saying? It was,
oh, yeah.
It was the way it had to be, and to end that show and to end that species.
It's a very prescient ending, too. It's much ahead of its time, obviously.
And like I say, the most people that respond to me or ask me for things, it's about dinosaurs. I mean, it's dinosaurs still, and that's being put on a pay network thingy, isn't it?
I believe it's on Disney Plus.
It's on Disney Plus now. Okay.
It is on Disney Plus.
Okay.
So you should be seeing those checks coming your way soon.
Every $1.95 check I get, I cash right away.
I believe it. I mean, they must be sending you money for those Funko Pops,
No, they're not sending me money. I sign Funko Pops for my fans, and my wife says, "You're making a lot of people money." I said, what the heck? God bless them if they can make a few bucks out of my avatar. So
sure.
More power to them.
You've mentioned, how important dinosaurs was, and it's kind of a cultural touchstone, because there was toys at McDonald's, there were children's toys, there were books and coloring books, and I may or may not have a baby Sinclair sitting in my basement in a bag, a baby, a speak and pull baby Sinclair.
Do you really? Well, save it, man. You can make some money on that later.
Well, I'm going to save it for my kids because, again, for me, it's one of those things where, like, I genuinely don't know if a lot of people my age realize how important the things we watch when we're kids are. And it's one of those shows that stuck with me, and it's really allowed me to realize my love of puppetry and voice acting because, again, as someone who, really loves the quality of voice acting in dinosaurs, like there's nothing, there are a few TV shows that have such a stellar voice cast as dinosaurs throughout, obviously.
Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome. And, I've also had the opportunity to speak with a fair amount of people that have been on the show. Yourself, Sam McMurray. I actually know and I'm friends with Leif Tilden, who was in the Robbie Sinclair suit, I believe, entire run of the show. Yeah.
And Bill Barretta was in mine, and he's now a big producer at Henton.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think it's it's a seminal TV show. And I think, the ending notwithstanding, I'm the baby, gotta love me. If you say that to a certain age of people, they will know exactly what you're talking about.
I wrote that song.
I know. I know. Yeah, I know. So I wanted to ask you about it. Kind of, I wouldn't say, some people might ask why.
Why? There, Chris. Well, it started. I remember I was actually in the back of a car driving to some ABC function, and I just got this thing in my mind, and I wrote a different melody to it. Mine was, "I'm the baby, gotta love me, purple eyes, so soft and cuddly, especially when they're hanging," all that, and then.
It's a lot sweeter of a song.
It is sweet, and then Ray Colcourt, who worked with Michael Jacobs, he asked me. He was very sweet. He said, "Do you mind if I do some work on this song and we can split the mechanicals, split the residual?" I said, "Sure, do whatever you want." So he did, and the version that is on around is his mostly his music and my words. But that's where that started. It just popped in my head.
And it's, of all the things that are kind of known from the show, the "I'm the baby, God love me," the baby dinosaur song is kind of the thing that, so many people know. So, yeah, myself included. So I have to give you, the utmost, thank you from me. Just, again, it's dinosaurs. I think for a lot of people my age, it really colored our views on the world. Obviously, the ending of the show is so, I don't know. People ask why people my age are kind of so screwed up, and I'm just like, well, one of our favorite TV shows when we were a kid had all the main characters die due to global warming. So like, if that doesn't give you some idea.
Well, I remember a lot of the shows I used to watch as a kid on television. I don't believe the cast ever died. So yes, Dinosaurs was a little unique in that.
So you've talked about it a little bit, but tell me kind of what your thoughts were when the show, finally came to that kind of so infamous ending at this point. Kind of what were your personal feelings on it?
Well, I think my feelings were what I discussed. I thought it was, and this was before, obviously, we knew the reaction of people, and a lot of people, thought it was, or they were worried about their kids mostly. I think parents didn't want their kids to see some of their favorite characters die. But as an adult, I looked at it, and it's like I told you. I think, well, it's right in some ways. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
It's the way it has to be. They could have ended it with just Robbie, sticking his head in a pile of pudding. I mean, they could have done that, but it was interesting that they chose it. And like I said many times, I think it's appropriate. I mean, as far as the ending of a show about dinosaurs and fossil fuels and all that stuff, that it ended the way it did. I mean, I thought it was really interesting, and I'm kind of glad they did it. That's my opinion from the deep blue sea.
Well, and to your point, I mean, again, how do you end a show about dinosaurs?
Right.
I hate to break it to everybody, but
they're not here anymore. Yeah,
they're not here. Yeah, exactly. They're not here anymore. So sorry, That's unfortunate. I mean, it's just the way it is.
And my guess is that the kids who were maybe affected by it, they're going to get over that. They're going to go and get over that. Are they, Chris?
I was going to say. I mean, that's the thing about the show. For someone who's a fan of the show, I remember the show for a lot of other moments. But for a lot of folks, that is kind of the moment that so many people remember from the show. Right. And it's... I understand why they get hung up on it, but to your point, I mean, again, there's so much in that show that has nothing to do with the summarily wiping out of the entire crew, the cast of the show. So
that's true. I mean, it was satirical, it was political, and that's what made it great. It was good for the kids to look at the puppets, and it's great for the parents to listen to characters like Harold Hand Up Me.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was great.
So I guess the last question I have for you is: is there anything you're working on now that you can talk about? How's COVID affecting your ability to work as an actor?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's affecting everybody. I did a couple of movies for before the pandemic. We filmed them end of 2019. And they're going to come out eventually, whether they come out on paid networks or, I don't know, Vimeo or whatever. But there was a couple of projects. One was called Deep in the Forest, and another one was, I forget the name because it's long and complicated, but it's Mariette Hartley and her husband and mine. They're both dear friends of mine, but Jerry Soroka wrote a movie about Mariette's life, and Mariette asked all her friends to do, cameos in the movie. So we did that before the pandemic, and that hopefully will be out. Who knows what's going to happen? And then I do these Zoom play readings, which keeps me a little busy, and I do stuff like this, talk to guys like you, which is terrific. You're a very good interview, incidentally.
Oh, thank you.
And other podcasts, and that's what I do. I mean, it's I did one job. I had one voiceover job, a dubbing job that I actually went to a studio to do it. And boy, I mean, I remember I walked in and there was nobody there. The other people were in another room. The everything was sanitized. There were UV lights. They really took time to make sure it was safe, because I asked them. I said, "Is this safe?" And they said, "Yes." But beside that, I haven't. I think I turned down an audition because it was a studio audition. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to mess around with it. I mean, I'm of a certain age, and I don't want to mess around with that thing. It's a terrible disease.
I'm with you. I haven't left my house in weeks, and I'm thankful that my wife and I are both able to work from home. And
that is a lucky thing. I audition for voiceovers once in a while from home, and it's nice to be able to do that. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of the guys who do voiceovers regularly or commercials, whatever, they do them from home. I mean, they have their studios and they do them from home. Yeah, but it certainly affects me as far as auditions or as far as reporting to a set to do some work. It's terrible. Not only for actors, obviously, but for everybody.
Sure. I'm right there with you. It's nice to talk to people that take this seriously. That's that's all that matters, really, anymore in this day and age.
Years ago, I read I can't remember his name. An actor, pretty famous actor, said, "Oh, I'm bored, and acting is silly and stuff." And at the time, I was young. I said, "How could that ever be? That can't be." And I sort of carried that feeling, through right now. I mean, I think acting is you got to have some passion. If it's diminished, okay, but you got to have some passion for it. And it's what brought you into it. It changed, it's what changed your life. You can't disregard it or minimize it. You've got to be excited about it. And most actors that I know and talk to or listen to are. So despite COVID, that's a good thing that the industry is still, chomping at the bit to get back.
So big thanks to Kenneth Johnson, Stuart Pankin, and Holly Fulger for sitting down and talking with me. Obviously, having a chance to talk to people who are in something that I love as much as Zenon is always a treat. So big thanks to them. Can we talk about, Tim, how much of a fucking bop Zoom, 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 Make My Heart Go Boom, Boom, My Supernova Girl is? Because you and I both know that is a banger.
Right.
And okay. I am not being facetious.
So...
Oh, boy, you're about to shit all over it. Right. It's coming. I'm feeling it.
Do you know what it really reminded me of? It really reminded me of George Clinton and the Goombas Walk the Dinosaur from the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is, a far bigger bop in my opinion. But that chorus, the zoom, zoom, zooms in the chorus really reminded me of the boom, boom, aka boom. And it was...
So what you're saying is you are particularly suited to be analyzing this song since you own a Bowser picture vinyl of that song.
Yeah, so as a massive fan of... I just thought it paled in comparison to Walk the Dinosaur by George Clinton and the Goombas, but I can see why, if you've grown up with this, it would be considered a bop, I suppose. I'll let you off with that one.
Realistically, how good are songs in movies that are made for those movies, right?
Yeah.
How often are they good enough to at least remember the chorus, right? I'm not talking about a movie that's already a musical or something, like a genuine, this is an original track for the movie. It's pretty hard to do.
It, like a lot of the stuff in this film, it made me think of the earlier 90s. It felt, as I said, like the George Clinton song I'm referring to came out in 1993. This didn't feel like it, because by 1999, you were getting into the sort of the more pop punky kind of vibe from a lot of...
If you were to classify Protozoa as an actual band, what genre would you put them in?
I don't know. It's kind of...
Because they're not NSYNC or Backstreet Boys. Because that's what it feels like it's trying to go for, but they completely missed the mark, right?
It's one of those annoying fake bands in a movie where the instruments that you're hearing are not matching the instruments that are on stage, and I'm at a point...
So you're saying that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles don't actually play a one-string bass?
Actually, yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is another good kind of touching point for what kind of music this is, really.
Are you talking about the second movie? Are you talking about Vanilla Ice? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, it's that kind of stuff. It feels like it's trying to be a bit ever so slightly hip-hop, ever so slightly kind of funky, but in a very, again, backwards kind of early now than late 90s. It's very weird.
Yeah, it's like they made a movie about the future, but that future was just the past.
I'd be interested to find out how, if this film took a while to be... Oh, no, because the book it's based on came out in 97. So it can't have been, stuck in limbo for a long time. It must have... Yeah, I don't know. It just feels... Everything about it feels early 90s to me.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you.
Because there's even there's one scene down on Earth where they make a big deal of kids on scooters and rollerblading, and I feel again those were still cool by the late 90s, but it's still I don't know, it just feels very out of place, out of time, out of space.
And feeling. I know what you're fucking going for. And crawling on the planet's face. Some insects called the human race.
Called the human race. Lost in time, lost in space, and meaning.
Yeah, there you go. Look at that. Charles Gray, dude. Nobody's done it better than him since, and boy, they've tried. Boy, haven't they. It's I think, though, to be fair, that kind of out-of-timeness of Zenon, I think that's what makes it so timeless.
Oh yeah, it's what was compelling for me, because plot-wise, it's very kind of... It's quite generic in terms of the plot structure and stuff, but it was the things that really stuck out for me watching it were the visuals and the bits that's kind of where it was set and how it felt.
Yeah, it's very much a product of a time and place, and it is a little bit of a time capsule
Yeah.
Because again, it's weird that the future, even in 99, that was not the way the future was ever going to look. But that's the way people in 92 thought the future was going to look, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But filmed it in 99.
Yeah, it's a lot of interesting specific choices that were made. And I don't think I really have a whole lot of qualms with this movie. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but for what it is, a children's film that Disney Channel made in the late 90s based off of a children's book, it's surprisingly good. It works really well. And I mean, they made 2 sequels, so...
Yeah, I think the thing with the DCOMs in general is like, we think of a lot of Disney content tends to work on multiple levels for adults and kids, mainly because... when you're making a film for the cinema, the children have to be accompanied by their parents. But the difference with content made for the Disney Channel is when you're at home watching TV, you do that without your parents, especially at the times that these things were on. So a lot of the DCOMs do feel like they are very specifically for children and definitely not for adults. And so like when we watched DCOMs on our podcast, we did find that quite a lot, was that we were not able to relate as adults to these films very much because they were just clearly made specifically for tweens and teenagers, whereas this film, plot-wise and character-wise, it was all very much for a younger audience, but there was enough visually to keep me interested.
Yeah, and you have some really great performances. I actually kind of surprised we haven't really... I mean, we talked about Stuart Pankin's outfit, but as someone who's a huge fan of dinosaurs, Stuart Pankin in anything is a welcome addition. I mean, again, he plays that kind of stern character, but at the same time, you can't help but love him. I mean, obviously, and then he gets, looped into Holly Fulger's character, and then they end up getting married in the second and third film. So, clearly they were doing something right with the adult actors. It's funny, the people who play her parents are given nothing to do. Her dad might as well have been Commander Plank, like, realistically.
Yeah.
It almost would have worked better because her parents are such a non-issue. Like, they don't do anything. Yeah, They essentially are just there to meter out punishment and then be proud of their daughter at the end that, she saw something that we didn't see, even though she did her best to try to convince us. Like, yeah. Okay.
Well, there's even a scene quite near the beginning when the commander's doing his big speech and basically saying that, we've got our investors coming, you've all got to play nice and stuff. And there's a look that he gives to Zenon, which is obviously like very tellingly aimed at her to behave. And that scene would have resonated a lot more, as you say, like if he was the dad. Like there's no need for both of her parents to be scientists working on the station. Like her dad being the commander is a lot stronger excuse for her to exist in the station. Like,
and honestly, do you want the best way that they could have redone this movie to actually have it make perfect sense and still keep it more or less the same movie? So you have Commander Plank be her dad, and then Holly Fulger is a woman who has a kid, and instead of it being, she's sent to stay with her aunt, it's they're exchange students. And so you then get to have Raven in the movie a little bit more because you have the character who's replacing Zenon on the space station, and then you have Zenon on Earth. So it's, space station on Earth out of water, Earth on space station out of water. And then it gives the characters on the space station more time because, again, for me, that's one of my biggest complaints is you don't have enough Raven Simone in this movie. Yeah. So if you have it that way, you have a little bit of both more than just it being weighted in one direction. And then, you can still have Holly Fulger and Stuart Pankin fall in love because, they're getting to know each other's kids and, it's like a Parent Trap-ish type thing because, again, that's kind of a side effect of this movie is these two characters end up meeting each other and falling in love, which always kind of feels contrived. But again, the characters are so good in this movie that it doesn't really bother me as much as it would in another one. But that's how you could fix this movie because it honestly, like, her parents are such non-issues that any amount of time that they're given in the movie, it just doesn't seem like it really matters. And I don't even remember them in the second and third one at all. I'm sure they're there, but I just don't remember them.
Well, I was going to ask actually if you'd seen the sequels.
I've seen the second one. So the second one is about I think the second one is the second one is Protozoa disappears. Yeah.
Did he fall down a warp pipe and end up in Cooper City?
Yeah, right. And to my point, actually, in the second movie, they actually recast her parents. So,
and Raven's not in it as well, is she?
No, she's in the third one, though.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, Raven is, I think when the second movie came out, Raven is already has her own show.
Yeah, has her own thing going on. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody returns for the second and third one. I mean, you have Zenon, and then I think Stuart Pankin and Holly Fulger as well. So yeah, the parents are so unimportant they recast them in the second movie. I mean, again, I don't want to speak ill of Greg Thrillaway or the actress Gwyneth Walsh who plays Zenon's mom, but they're not given anything to do, so they could have almost just been omitted from the film, and it probably would have worked better if because one fish out of water is fun, but two fish out of water I think is more fun when you're talking about a kids film.
Yeah.
So, but I still like it. I still think it's as good as Halloween Town, and it's in that kind of same pantheon of early DCOMs that really made a lasting impression. Because let's not kid ourselves, there are a lot of DCOMs that are completely just throwaway. I mean, there are some that what the hell is the one about the kid becoming the leprechaun? Luck of the Irish?
I mean, as I said, I had a DCOM taped off the TV, and I can't even remember what it was called or what it was about, and I'd watched it a million times. So that tells you
it wasn't Quince, was it?
No, it was this weird, as I said, this cartoon about a crazy baby that was upsetting its parents. Honestly, that's all I remember. There was one bit where Dad had to sleep in the car or some shit. I don't remember. I said that they were just terrorized by their own child, and that was the comedy.
I've never heard of that one, so I would love to know what it is because it sounds insane. Disney Channel original movies. There's a lot of really memorable ones: Halloween Town, Zenon, Smart House. Again, it also kind of goes to the kind of person that you were. I remember Halloween Town and Zenon because and Can of Worms because those are sci-fi and horror, and that's what I'm into even now as an adult. Something like Smart House is kind of right up there as well. But things like Johnny Tsunami or Horse Sense or some of these other ones, I never watched them because I just wasn't appealing to me. So that's the other thing about these. It'll vary from person to person given what they're into. Because there were people that probably never saw Zenon because they just weren't into sci-fi.
Yeah.
So what would you give Zenon out of 5, Tim?
I would give it a 3.5. And I guess where it was lacking would mainly be in the plot and the writing. As I said, for me, the things that were keeping me interested was I was just excited to find out what silly thing would be attached to the wall and where the next flashing buttons were going to be popping out of. And that was where the main enjoyment came from me. His performance is great and visually interesting, but maybe the plot was a little, especially because we do spend a heck of a lot of time on Earth, which is not as interesting as space. Space beats Earth, in my opinion. So yeah, 3.5.
No, I'm with you. I mean, again, I would have liked to have had there be a better balance, 50% in space, 50% on Earth. So
yeah,
I'm gonna give it a 4. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's also something that as a adult who plans on having kids at some point, I mean, this is something that I could still show to my kids now, and it still holds up. Which that's the timelessness of these Disney Channel original movies. Some of them, not all of them, obviously.
I'd really like to know what kids today think of the aesthetics of this film. Would they find it as funny as we do, what they thought the future would look like? I think that would be a really interesting thing to actually find out.
I would be interested to see if they could even make it through this movie. I mean, they may find it just so they might find it so kind of passé and kind of dumb that they just check out immediately. I'm not saying that all kids would do that, but I mean, again, there's just, there is that kitschy charm to this that maybe it is just appealing to us as millennials and not to anyone else. I don't know. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but like there is a possibility that is just us with, 90s nostalgia and
with a bit of ironic charm thrown in for good measure.
Yeah, the ironic charm is definitely a big part of it. So, yeah, I mean, again, you could do a lot worse with Disney Channel original movies.
Absolutely.
For sure. So before we close this podcast out, do you have a Disney Channel original movie that is your favorite? Since this is Disney Channel Original Movie Month.
I'm very excited to find out that you are going to be reviewing Teen Beach Movie, because that was one of the favorites that I watched. I thought it was genuinely quite funny and very funnily, quite well written. And equally, as I said before, like the Disney Channel version of Annie had some real money put behind it. Like sets wise, it looks fantastic. And who doesn't love the musical Annie? Let's face it.
Yeah, I only know of Teen Beach Movie because I guess one of the songs from it was like a TikTok thing for a while.
Ah, was it?
Yeah, I think I forget how the song goes, but it's like the two main characters like going back and forth, and they're like standing on the beach, like asking for it to stop, I guess. So that was like a TikTok thing for a while. So I heard that song, but I never heard anything else from it. But you are not the first person to tell me that it is very good. So I'm looking forward to watching it, because it's like a send up of like teen beach movies from the 50s and 60s, right?
Yeah, so it has like that real kind of 50s, 60s chic, which it's a really interesting thing to have made so recently, just because it's not the kind of benchmark that most kids would ever have to have a reference point for.
Right.
I mean, neither did I, but it was still funny and tongue-in-cheek enough that like I didn't know what the tropes of a surfer musical were, but by the end of the film, it did a very good job of letting me know.
Yeah, again, to your point, like it's like saying to kids today, like, oh, how do you feel about like 70s like folk rock? Like, what the fuck? Like, they don't care.
Yeah.
You would assume they don't care. So like even going further back to like the music of like Elvis and like Blue Hawaii is one of the movies that like they're parodying, I'm sure, because it's like a beach movie. Like that's like you said, that's a really weird, oddly specific point in time. Like really oddly specific.
But obviously at the same time, the whole point of the film is it's these kids trapped in this and they don't want to be there. So you don't need to have that recognition to know how uncomfortable they would feel in this kind of setting that they don't understand. So yeah, it works really well.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to watching it. So
see how you get.
I'm glad to hear that's good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's good. I would be curious if it's as good as High School Musical, because that is the bar that was set so high. Do you like High School Musical?
No.
I like one or two songs from it, but that's kind of it.
So my entire kind of sphere of knowledge of High School Musical, until we reviewed it for the podcast, was my ex Kirsty, her sister Gemma, one New Year's Eve party, spending literally maybe 5 hours playing the SingStar High School Musical game on the PS2. So playing the same 4 or 5 songs over and over again for 5 hours in a room by herself was one of the worst things that have happened to me in my life. So it kind of traumatized me in a way. So
5 hours?
Literally, it was. Luckily, there were enough rooms at the house party to go and do something else. But any time we wandered back into that room, she would still be singing the same song.
That sounds like insanity.
It was.
Yeah, I would probably hate it too. Without even having seen it, I would probably hate it. So, to be fair, yeah, I saw High School Musical a long time ago, so I don't really remember it. But I'm really excited to watch Teen Beach Movie, just because that one song that I've heard was already better than pretty much anything from High School Musical. So there's also that. I mean, hey, a movie that has music in it, it's almost judged more by the music than anything else.
Absolutely.
So Yeah. So, Tim, I would ask you where people can find you when you're not here, but it sounds like there won't be a whole lot of finding anymore, will there? Other than maybe Twitter.
Yeah, so I'm kind of winding down my my main show, which is We Played This, which is a podcast about video games where I grill a guest about their favourite and fondest memories of video gaming. I mean, it will still be online, so if that's something that you think you would be interested in hearing, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at We Played This Pod, or you can just search for We Played This on all of your podcast apps. And yeah, I did a very long time ago now have a Disney podcast where I used to review the obscure and forgotten live action Disney movies on the hunt for a hidden gem, and that you can find that on all of your apps as Without a Mouse, or we're on Twitter at Podwam.
And guess what? I was on not only Without a Mouse, but I was also on an episode of We Played This.
You were?
I can say that I was on both of them. I do have a question from a frequent guest of the Culture Cast and creative collaborator of mine, Jess Byer. Did Jess kill your podcast? Because that's what she thinks. That's what she keeps joking to me. She's like, "Oh my God, I didn't kill his podcast."
Yeah, so like it took about 6 months possibly to actually get her to actually pin her down to a recording date, and that was so stressful that I decided I couldn't podcast ever again.
that woman Jess Byer, she drove me to the edge, to the edge of my sanity. Yeah, that's what she asked me, so I wanted to ask you because it's just odd timing.
No, it was absolutely coincidental. Basically, like I've recently got myself a full-time job for the first time since before I started podcasting, and there's been this whole pandemic on, and I'm just very conscious of wanting to spend less time in front of a computer, especially since now that's what I do at work. And more than anything, after the pandemic, I want to spend as little time in my room as possible.
You, me, and everybody else, pal.
So yeah, I'm just going to be a jobbing guest on everyone else's shows for the time being.
I mean, again, like I told you before off the podcast, if you can get that gig while podcasting, that's the gig to have. The gig to have, podcasting tip from a podcaster. If you can manage to get on a podcast where you don't have to edit it and your editor puts it out consistently on a weekly, monthly, or semi-weekly basis, you're never going to have to do anything for a podcast. You will never have to do, all you'll ever have to do is show up prepared. So if you can land that gig, do it, because hey, you get to talk about something, you don't have to do any of the editing. And I'm not sitting here complaining. Like, if I could do that, anyone would. It's the more fun option, the one that Tim is taking. So,
well, I mean,
so
I even managed to, slash the workload with my other podcast. We Played This, because obviously, since it's an interview podcast, I had absolutely zero prep to do before the show. I would just literally turn my mic on and start recording and ask questions. But yeah, it's always the editing that's the killer.
Yeah, it is. It's if it's driving people out of podcasting, it's not great. But hey, you know what? I don't not enjoy it. It was weird hearing my voice the first time, but then I kind of got over it. So other than that. So as for me, you can find me on Twitter at Christmas Claus. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at CultureCast. And you go to culturecast.com to check out the RSS feed for the podcast. We are on Patreon, patreon.com/CultureCast if you want to kick a couple dollars our way for some bonus content. Big thanks to you, Tim, for joining me, as always. Next time, it won't be a Disney movie, so...
It's been major, Chris. It's been absolutely major. Nothing minor about
major.
Today.
No, it's not major. It's macro and micro. Oh no, wait. She says major though.
Yeah, she says
that's
major
right.
and minor.
And that's right. And he says macro and micro.
Zetas Lapetas, Chris. Get it right.
Sorry. Yeah. Boy, what a weird movie. In a good way. Just like what a weird like major and oh my god, major and minor, is that what it is? And macro and micro, huh?
I imagine major and minor is like Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, like it's got an ever so slight space reference in there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, macro and micro is like just makes no sense. Like, sure, I guess. Like, that doesn't sound like a cool thing for people to be saying. How major and micro? Like,
and they totally got it wrong as well, because they use viral as a negative term, whereas these days viral means like you've become famous.
Yeah, exactly. It's super weird. Well, thank you, Tim, for joining me to talk about Zenon. And next time won't be a Disney movie. So there's that.
Oh, thank God! I'm finally being let free,
ejected from orbit. You're breaking free of the orbit of the Disney planet, and you're going off into the galaxy to find something that's not produced by the House of the Mouse.
I'm free.
So make sure to catch the next episode.